Good morning, everybody, and welcome to DNN, the Doomers News Network, where we don't sugarcoat the news. We just give it to you straight because somebody has to. And once again, I'm joined by my friends, Travis and Melody. We've got a fantastic show for you today. We've got a special guest who's going to be joining us shortly. Travis, tell us about the show that we've got today, brother.
Well, we got a nice little show lined up for you guys, and I wanted to say happy Saturday and good morning to you guys. First and foremost, thank you for all of the support. We hope you guys are doing well, and we hope you guys enjoy this video. We're going to start the first video by going to Jack with This Week in Dune, the classic This Week in Dune. He's got a lot to talk about. I think we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about microcomputers. Is that right? At the end?
SuperMicro computers. Not just any microcomputers. Super.
I'm so sorry, guys. And then story number two, Melody's going to bring on a special guest that's going to provide testimony on the Hurricane Helene recovery. So he's got a lot of stuff to talk about. He's also, I believe, a news anchor. So he's very well spoken, according to Melody. So, Melody, we're leaning on you on this one. Story number three.
Yes.
He's a reporter, so he should be doing a good job, right?
Wow. So, okay. Thanks, Trav.
Okay, you know what? I'm digging myself a hole. Story three is going to be by me. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, guys, as far as the labor market. So I'm going to go into the labor market. I'll show you guys how that ties into the housing market, how unemployment tracks delinquency. And then we're going to end by going into story number 4 today, which is Melody talking about California wine catastrophe. Maybe I ruined the name of that story, but it is what it is. Jack, sir, back to you.
All right. Thank you. And Travis, if we could share my screen because it is time for This Week in Doom. And we had some doomy earnings this week. It was a very earnings heavy week in the finance world. In particular, we had big tech earnings, but also on full display was the bifurcation in the economy, how all the companies that just move data around are doing great, but all the companies that actually make or build things are doing not so great. So first, let's start off with the big tech earnings. We had 5 of the Magnificent 7 all reported this week: Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Meta. And we had some pretty common themes overlapping. Let's start with Google here. Google parent Alphabet reported earnings. Fantastic numbers from Google. Cloud revenue was up 35% year over year. Cloud revenue is where their artificial intelligence and their data centers live. So that continues to grow high double-digit percentages year over year. But Google spent a lot of time on their conference call and in their earnings report talking about cost cutting. And when you hear cost cutting, that means layoffs. Big tech layoffs by the tens of thousands. Get ready, because usually we start the year that way. And they're already forecasting this on their most recent conference call. So after Christmas is behind us, we're probably going to be looking at big job losses in Silicon Valley once again. We also got earnings from Facebook parent Meta. I can't stand that rebrand, but there it is. Their revenue was up 19% year over year. Now, Meta shares kind of took it on the chin this week because they continue to burn cash like crazy on Reality Labs, which is where the metaverse and Mark Zuckerberg's other pet projects like smart glasses lives. They burnt $4.4 billion off of just $270 million in revenue. So these guys are literally lighting money on fire, and Meta shareholders let it be known that they were not too happy about that. We also got earnings from Microsoft. Again, fantastic top-line numbers. Cloud revenue grew 20% year over year. That's where their data center and AI lives. Now, Microsoft expressed some frustration that they're having problems building out their data centers fast enough. In particular, permitting and power requirements are having a hard time being met. So it's possible that this is the early signs of the AI bubble bumping into pesky little details like the laws of physics that say eventually these numbers just can't get any bigger. There's just not enough power on the grid to power all of these things. Remember, every single GPU that NVIDIA sells uses as much power as a family of 4, and Microsoft has been buying these things by the tens of thousands. I'm sorry, the hundreds of thousands. Apple earnings also came out this week. Apple returned to growth for the first time in about 2 years. Their revenue was up 6% year over year, but their earnings per share took a massive hit. 44% year over year decline in earnings per share for Apple, driven entirely by a $14 billion tax bill from the European Union. European Union basically told Apple, we think the taxes in Ireland are too low, and therefore arbitrarily you owe us $14 billion. Apple challenged it in court, and shocker, they lost. So Apple had to fork over a couple of $billion to the European Union, and that took their earnings down. Apple also expressed concerns about sales in China, which has been a pretty common theme this earnings season. A lot of companies are warning about the health of the Chinese consumer. Then we got earnings from Amazon as well. Again, big top line beat, revenue up 11% at Amazon. Good growth in their cloud segment. Their online store, which basically is Amazon.com, increased by 6% year over year. And they're using that growth in their core business of online sales to finance some incredibly large CapEx numbers that continue to just pour money, again, by the billions into building out these data centers. Whereas Meta is financing it with their advertising revenue, Google doing the same, Amazon is financing it with the money they make from their core business. So all the big tech companies reported massive top-line revenue beats, big growth in their cloud computing segment, AI. But then we got some companies from what I like to refer to as the real world that reported earnings, and it was a totally different story. We had construction equipment maker Caterpillar reported earnings this week. Globally, construction equipment sales were down 9% in every region on Earth, China, Africa, North America, the Middle East, basically everywhere. We are seeing high single digits to low double-digit declines in the sale of construction equipment. That is not a good indicator for the health of the economy. Another bad indicator, we got results from BASF. That is the German chemical giant. In particular, they were also warning about sales in China, which were down 10% year over year. And BASF also reported a lot of difficulties in the automotive segment and the agriculture segment. And speaking of the automotive segment, we got earnings from Stellantis, that's Chrysler parent company. They reported revenue down 27% year over year and spent a lot of time on their conference call talking about right-sizing inventory. Now, Stellantis has made a lot of headlines this year. They're having labor disputes. They're laying off workers and shutting down plants. They're actually suing the UAW because the UAW has threatened to go back on strike. So the problems in the auto industry continue to mount, and Stellantis posts some pretty disappointing earnings because of that. We also got earnings from Schneider Energy. This is the largest liquefied natural gas exporter in the United States, and they posted a massive 48% decline in their earnings per share because of a lack of demand in the spot market for their cargoes of liquefied natural gas. Schneider sells about 80% of their LNG on long-term contracts that are basically fixed in place, and it's pretty much guaranteed money. And the remaining 20% they sell in the spot market, which is more susceptible to volatility as the underlying commodity moves up and down. Well, natural gas prices are way down this year, and Schneider spot market cargoes have been selling for much less than they were a year ago as global energy demand continues to struggle along. And even Estee Lauder, even the cosmetics industry, which is typically rather resilient and immune to recessions, not the case. Estee Lauder reported terrible numbers. They cut their dividend. They pulled their guidance for the year because they've got a new CEO in the company, also mentioning big-time declines in sales in China, the health of the Chinese consumer. This stock got crushed this week on that news. So you can kind of see here, guys, some overlapping themes. All the big tech companies are doing great, big-time double-digit revenue growth, and everybody else is living in reality where the consumer is strapped. The energy markets are down. Demand for autos is down. The chemicals that go into them is down. You can see this bifurcation in the economy. We also got some movement in the Boeing story this week. Boeing has come out with a new offer to try to end the strike, which is now in its second month. The offer included a 38% wage increase, a $12,000 ratification bonus, as well as other goodies like a 100% 401k match up to 8% of salary. So this is a pretty sweet deal for the union. Right now, initial reviews appear as if the union is backing this. Union leadership has encouraged members to vote in favor of this, and they better, because Boeing just raised $21 billion this week by issuing shares. So Boeing is sitting on a massive pile of cash. It's all debt at this point, but they can use that cash to ride out this strike for up to a year and a half if they really had to. So probably going to see the Boeing strike end rather soon. They're scheduled to vote on this in a day or two here. And the Boeing strike was showing up in the jobs report as well. We had a very disappointing jobs report, something that Travis will talk about more later in the show here. Just 12,000 jobs were added in the non-farm payrolls report this week. A huge disappointment. The market was expecting 115,000, and that is down sharply from the 254,000 that we had last month. Also included in this downward revision was a 31,000 downward revision to the September jobs number and an 81,000 downward revision to the August number. So if you subtract those downward revisions from the 12,000 jobs added, we actually had a net loss of 100,000 jobs, according to the establishment survey of the non-farm payrolls report. So this is by far the worst jobs report since 2020. Now, the mainstream press is out there saying disregard this jobs report because Boeing, because hurricanes. Now, you can see the Boeing showing up in the jobs report. That strike showed up with about 44,000 jobs lost in transportation manufacturing. About 6,000 of those were automotive, and the other 38,000, that's the Boeing strike. So that will be going away if the Boeing strike ends soon. But the hurricane excuse doesn't really pass the sniff test. I mean, for example, Hurricane Helene amazingly made landfall on September 26th, and somehow that caused the Bureau of Labor Statistics to overstate August jobs numbers by 81,000 20 days before that even happened. The hurricane excuse doesn't really pass the sniff test. This was a very bad jobs report. And we got new developments in the ongoing saga of the fraud at SuperMicro Computer. This one is a big one this week. Auditor Ernst & Young has resigned effective immediately from SuperMicro Computer. Remember, guys, we had that Hindenburg research report that came out about a month ago. That was 2 months ago now. That was largely based on some original work by the OrcaFin on Substack. He's now on Beehive. It basically found out that SuperMicro Computer, who has a documented history of accounting fraud, is committing accounting fraud again based on related party transactions. They rehired all the people they fired after their last accounting fraud. They're also doing things like sanctions violations, selling into China and Russia. And well, shortly after that short report came out, SuperMicro announced that they were delaying their 10K report, which means our auditor won't sign off on our books. And I remember saying back in August, the next thing we're going to hear is SuperMicro is excited to announce their new auditor. And well, Ernst & Young quit as their auditor this week. The quote in particular, they used some very damning language in their resignation letter. This clip here, Ernst & Young raised questions about the firm's commitment to integrity and ethics. According to a filing that SuperMicro released on Wednesday, we are resigning due to information that has recently come to our attention, which has led us to no longer be able to rely on management's and the audit committee's representations, Ernst & Young wrote. In other words, Ernst & Young said, these guys are liars and we are not staking our reputation on their books. And look at the big red candle in SuperMicro Computer stock this week. This thing was down big. This stock is now down almost 80% from its high back in March. It's now negative for the year, although still sharply higher than it was before this whole AI mania began. Guys, this does not bode well for the round-tripping bubble of the artificial intelligence boom. SuperMicro Computer is NVIDIA's third largest customer. They are one of the biggest growth stories around this AI situation. And, if we're speaking frankly here, this company had a documented history of fraud. They were delisted from the NASDAQ in 2020 because of an accounting fraud that was exposed in 2018. So people should not be surprised to learn that this company with a history of fraud is committing fraud. But Ernst & Young all but confirmed that with their resignation this week. They now have until November 16th to refile their 10K to find some other auditor to sign off on their books or risk being delisted by the NASDAQ. And thus ends This Week in Doom. Back to you guys.
Real quick, I got Andy here. I see you, Andy. I see you, buddy. I see everything you're doing. So should we bring Andy in now, or do you want to wait?
Hold on. Yes, but I have a comment about SuperMicro. And, as someone who sat next to auditors for, 7 years at a company, for your auditors to fire you, that is because most of the time they have no idea what they're doing and they ask you, is this okay? Is this what this means? Da 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 da. So that is like so bad. I can't even describe it. So this is going to be wild.
Speaking of the auditors and Ernst and Young, I've made a lot of parallels to the dot-com bubble with the AI mania, the round tripping, the vendor financing of the dot-com bubble. We've seen this exact playbook before. And, Ernst and Young, they're one of the big four accounting firms, right? Deloitte, Ernst and Young, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the last one evades me at this moment. KPMG. Thank you.
Yeah. You got it.
But the big four used to be the big five.
That's right.
Right. There was those four, and then there was Arthur Andersen. And Arthur Andersen happened to be the auditor who signed off on the books of the two largest accounting frauds in history. They had signed off on Enron and WorldCom, who both went belly up shortly after the dot-com bubble burst. And so Arthur Andersen, the big five, became the big four because Arthur Andersen's name wasn't worth spit after they had signed off on those books. And to see the language that Ernst and Young chose to use, that was very damning language.
Yes.
Ernst and Young, first of all, they have zero fear of any legal blowback from SuperMicro. So they're calling these guys liars in an SEC filing, and they're doing it without fear. That means they are convinced that this is the case.
Yes.
And number two, they're putting so much distance between themselves and what SuperMicro has done with this strong language because they're afraid of being Arthur Andersen. That's what I took away from what Ernst and Young did.
What are the repercussions of saying something to that extent? Because obviously I'm sure there's contracts that they're signing, non-disclosure contracts, that they can't release certain information, but that was a very aggressive statement. I don't know how anyone that would read that statement wouldn't assume, wrongdoing. They have a history of it already. Isn't that a little bit of a risk for that accountant firm to be so aggressive coming out the gates like that? Because we see what happened after that statement. What happened to their stock? So
yes, that is a risk unless you have so much evidence that what you have just said is true.
Right.
And in my case, I'm putting myself in Ernst and Young's position here. I have a reputation to uphold, right? Ernst and Young's business is based on their name being worth so much weight that when they stamp it on somebody's books, it now carries weight, right? It's now credible. And so they are more worried about the damage to their reputation than they are worried about any potential legal blowback. And SuperMicro could sue, and they could say, hey, what you just said hurt our reputation so much and therefore give us money.
Yeah.
Ernst & Young is showing they have no fear of that. They are much more afraid of their reputation being damaged by SuperMicro's fraud.
Totally agree. I mean, I can't overemphasize this never happens. Like it has to be so bad because your auditors, they rely on you. Honestly, they don't do the kind of digging you would think that they do. So this is really bad, and it has to be very egregious.
Could I just soapbox it for another second, if you guys wouldn't mind humoring me, because I've spent a lot of time on this subject. And when I first started raising awareness or raising the alarm about the accounting in this AI mania, I mean, it wasn't SuperMicro, wasn't the name that I was like shouting about, right? It was NVIDIA and CoreWeave is who I was most worried about. But there have been other names along the way. But since I initially started raising this issue, the size of the AI bubble has tripled. It's more than tripled, right? I mean, NVIDIA was like a split adjusted. It was like a $40 company. Now it's like a $120 company. So, I mean, NVIDIA has tripled the whole bubble. It's now something like an $18 trillion stock bubble has been added to the S&P 500 since ChatGPT was released. Now, you've heard me mention my nuclear background a lot in here, and I often say how risk is the consequences of something happening times the probability of it happening. All right, that's always how you always quantify risk. Now, when I first started talking about the AI bubble, I think most people considered that it was very unlikely that there was any kind of accounting fraud happening, and that, oh no, the numbers are too big. It's a paranoid conspiracy theory, Jack in his tinfoil hat. All right, I get that, and everybody said, okay, very low likelihood times the possibility at the time. I thought it was, or the consequences, which I think would have been huge. But now, since I've started warning about this, the consequences have more than tripled of this happening, because the bubble has just inflated to such ridiculous proportions. But not only have the consequences of me being right about this tripled, but in my opinion, looking at what just happened with SuperMicro computer and the proximity of SMCI to NVIDIA, the buddy-buddy relationship, the bromance between their CEOs, how they talk about they've done business together for 30 years and they're such good friends. SuperMicro, third largest customer of NVIDIA. And SuperMicro is not even the only accounting fraud this week associated with AI. We also had that company Evolve, a much smaller outfit, but they came out and said our financial statements are BS. So in my opinion, the likelihood of this being true, that this is one big accounting fraud, has also tripled since I first started doing this. And remember, risk is consequence times probability. And both the consequences and the probability of this being a massive accounting fraud have tripled in the last year or so, which means the risk to the economy, the risk to everybody else has gone up 9-fold since we first started talking about this. All right. Now, the press doesn't want this to be true. I get it. We need to look. Somebody needs to look. Somebody with the ability to say, you know what, NVIDIA, open up your books and prove this isn't BS. There is enough smoke here that it's obvious there's fire. Now, where is the fire and how big is the fire remains to be seen. But this problem keeps getting bigger, and the likelihood that this is a fraud keeps getting bigger. It's time to stop treating this like a conspiracy theory, guys. The risk is just too big. We're talking about over $10 trillion of market cap has been created now. It's got to stop.
Well,
Sorry
M&J gave us $5, and we appreciate that support, M&J.
Thank you, M&J.
Dirt baggery alert. I love it. Absolutely love it. Wendy
M&J
also,
wants
thank
a
you.
dirt baggery t-shirt.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
For that for a while.
Wendy with $20 super sticker. Wendy, where's your message? We appreciate you so much. We hope you're gaining value, and we can't do this without you. So thank you, Wendy. Right. Now, let me go back here to see if we have anything. Oh, I see we have a private chat as well. Okay, he's backstage. So I'm going to bring in Andy.
Excellent.
Andy, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
I'm
can.
going to adjust your mic settings. Boom, got it. Okay. So take it away, Melody, and welcome, Andy.
Yes, welcome, Andy. So glad to see you. So I just want to give a little background of how I found Andy. It was a dark morning here in Tennessee, and I was feeling a little depressed about everything that I had seen out on the road, the lack of coverage, that, you know, the inability to really confirm some of these stories, because, you know, it's just hard to access some of these areas. So I was just scrolling, and I found a video, which we're going to put in the show notes, an interview, sit-down interview with Andy, where he talked about his boots on the ground experience. And it just, it got me out of bed, because it was just so good to hear someone else talking about what I had seen. And even confirming so much of what we believe to be true, but we're not seeing it in the press. And so, welcome, Andy. We're so privileged to have you here. I want to start with, just give us a little bit of your background, like how you became a reporter. That would be great to hear, actually.
Of course. And before I get into that, I'll preface, Travis. I am from Texas, so forgive me if Melody oversang me a little bit on my well speaking, right?
We're used to that, Andy. She's used to overselling everyone, especially me, so I know it. And then real quick, I just wanted to plug you real quick. Here's who Andy works for. That was my apologies. I was supposed to do that. He works with Fit News right here. So if you guys want to check out his body of work, come here. Like Melody said, it will be in the show notes. And here's the video Melody was talking about. Great video, by the way, very quality production. I skimmed through it. I haven't been able to watch it all, but back to you, sir. Wanted to plug you real quick. All of that will be in the show notes. And you moved out of Texas. Was it the humidity, insects, sharks, alligators? Why?
Actually, it was for the work. It was for an NBC affiliate. That's why I ultimately left the Lone Star State. I mean, I'm Dallas born and raised. I had done some independent work at the Texas-Mexico border. That was a magnificent experience. And I suppose that one of those reports caught the eye of, again, an NBC affiliate. here in the Carolinas. So I jumped on the opportunity, and let's just say it didn't work out too well, because here I am with Fitz News. I voluntarily resigned because, believe it or not, MSM might have biases and alliances that I don't necessarily condone. So,
Shocking.
right, furthermore, if they did their job, I wouldn't have a job here at Fitz News. So I suppose we're considered an alternative media outlet. We report on politics and current events, as Wikipedia puts it. But here at this institution, I consider myself a bit of a law enforcement auditor, which I know it might sound corny, just me saying it, but that entails folks providing us receipts, law enforcement officers themselves, and in turn we expose hypocrites. My little series we call Badge Gone Bad, or Badges Gone Bad, or BGB. That has led to the termination of several officers and deputies. It's led to at least one resignation of a police chief, and just again a lot of exposings of flagrant hypocrisies that again that MSM is not striking, even though it's low hanging fruit. So
Andy, if I
yeah.
can ask you, because I've been watching and monitoring the corruption with the municipalities, I'm starting to see the corruption spread on to the law enforcement side. I've been focusing on the school district. How are you able to tie in the corruption for that municipality? Is it a bond thing? Are they using the money from the state's budget? How are you tying in that corruption?
Tying in the corruption with finance?
Well, you're saying that you're following law enforcement, right? And
Correct.
you're seeing that they're corrupt in some way. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not rumored when you're provided an incident report to a domestic violence situation that
Okay.
never happened, right? I mean, in Lawrence County alone, which I mean, we'll talk about more of the Helene damage, because I would say that South Carolina, in addition to many other states, North Carolina included, was underreported on the damage we experienced here. But Lawrence County, it's a case study in terms of just I hate to refer to it so simply as the good old boy system, but I mean that's exactly what it is. When you've got a sheriff who has been charged with domestic violence, enabling his deputies to run around after being charged with domestic violence. And we exposed that particular case earlier this year, in which the solicitor impeded on a victim's order of protection to see to it that this deputy was back in uniform within 9 business days after pulling a gun on his wife. So that's the kind of stuff that we're exposing here. In fact, if you go to the homepage, I'm not going to ask you to go to the homepage, but on the homepage right now, we just put out another Badge Gone Bad. And one person out in Abbeville, that would be to the far right, the fellow with the orange glasses. There we go. Yeah, that's another case study in Abbeville. We had been monitoring him quietly for 7 months, and I get that these headlines are comical and perhaps sensational, but they're not inaccurate. I report beyond a reasonable doubt. So when we're provided complaints that we can't obtain through FOIA, when we're provided photographs from officers that departments don't know we're talking to, that's our bread and butter. So this certainly makes me tick, just reporting on just again that flagrant corruption. And it's not just with law enforcement. We have exposed. I mean, this outlet was built on exposing hypocrisies, and I've reported on politicians, folks wanting to be politicians. We have effectively terminated some campaigns dead in their tracks. We look at Senate District 35 over here in South Carolina. That's the Wild West, and in fact, I've got some memorabilia around the office on those reportings. But I know I'm getting sidebarred here. I'm not even talking about what y'all put me on for.
It's okay.
But that's just a little bit about myself and what makes me tick, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Andy, I think you're serving a vital function and you're doing a public service with what you're talking about. I mean, look, I'm a first responder. I'm very much a back the blue kind of guy. But at the same time, police are human beings and they are vulnerable to the same fallible, all the things that make us human, right? Cops are no exception, and they need to be held to higher standards because of the power that we entrust them with. And the only way to truly back the blue is to weed out the bad ones, in my opinion, because when we
Good.
allow that to fester, then the entire badge, the whole shield, the whole community is tarnished by it. So I think what you're doing is a huge public service. Thank you for that.
I appreciate the commendation there. And if I could add one thing to what you just said, it takes really good cops. It takes brave cops to provide us with what we subsequently report to expose the bad ones. And it's appalling to see so many bad ones in South Carolina. And a good cop would certainly recognize that too. And obviously they do, or else we wouldn't have a Badge Gone Bad series, right? So I bring up Badge Gone Bad and the receipts to say that we don't just put out something to put out something. We've got to substantiate it, which is what I would consider my reporting up Western North Carolina way as being substantiated. We were provided with receipts that MSM says we don't have. I personally have been fact checked by a Fox affiliate and an NBC affiliate. I've been censored on Facebook 3 times for talking about Helene, and it's not even political. I do my absolute best to avoid anything politically motivated, any political charged conversation. I'm only biased to the truth, or as close as I can get to it. So it's not like I was going off on rants here. I was just reporting the numbers as they were provided to us, which were horrible and not reported still. So, the journey started, I would say the Saturday after Helene for me. I live in Columbia, the capital city of South Carolina, and I was totally unaware of just the totality of the deluge, right? I live on the hospital grid. I didn't lose any power, but I had an appointment at an attorney's office that Saturday. And when I pulled out of my complex, I mean, the entire city was wind whipped. We're 130 miles from Asheville, and the telephone poles, we had telephone poles down. We had limited communications. Telephone signal was virtually kaput. Traffic lights were not operable. And then when I went over to Camden, which is where my meeting was, 189 miles from Asheville, it was even worse. And then that Saturday, in the same county where Camden's housed, that's where I saw my first neighborhood underwater. So that's when I started realizing that perhaps something isn't being emphasized here, maybe as importantly as it should. Even then, I was totally blind to what happened in Western North Carolina.
And Andy, can I ask you, when you first arrived to see these communities underwater from the hurricane, probably something you've never seen before, even though that you're from Texas, not Houston, you're from Dallas. I've seen it in Houston.
Right.
Can you talk on basically, did FEMA show up? Did the authorities, National Guard show up? Or was it initially just the community? What I'm used to is seeing the only one that is going to come to help people is whoever is capable in a community. Is that what you saw? And if so, how long was that going on before you finally saw some type of official, whether it's a police official or not, but how long did it take for authorities to really get out there to ascertain what was happening?
I have a timestamp to a photograph, which was the first day I saw FEMA. And by saw FEMA, they were hauling. I was going to cuss for a moment, but they were hauling through Burnsville in a fleet of blacked out expeditions, and that was my first. That was the first semblance of FEMA. And don't quote me on it, but it must have been the 19th of October.
Jeez.
So a lot of time had elapsed from my initial response to my first sighting of FEMA. Now, that being said, we have of course heard reports of people receiving help sooner than that, of there being FEMA sightings sooner than that, but I was probing all over Western North Carolina. The journey for me started technically it started in Rutherford County with Lake Lure, which I had never experienced a site like that. Even being raised in Texas, for a period of time, I lived in Freeport, which is just south of Galveston. So, of course, you're raised in the influence of Hurricane Katrina, right?
Yes.
And then there's, of course, the damage that will never be repaired after Hurricane Katrina or Ike or Harvey. So, I have personally piloted boats following a hurricane in Freeport, driving next to a stop sign in a 2-motor boat. So even then, it doesn't
Yep.
compare to what I saw in Buckham County.
Can we? Sorry, Travis. This might be a good time to show that Lake Lurie clip real quick. The one of the town.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean,
was that the longer clip?
Oh, yeah, shorter one. It's the image 988. Yep.
Let me put this up real quick.
This gave me chills when I watched it this morning.
All right, let me throw this up here for Andy. And now there's going to be I don't believe there's any volume on it. And here, Andy, go ahead and explain this for the viewers. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
All right, so what's going on here? It looks like it's in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Andy.
So it's fine. I've got to refer to my correspondence with the first responder that took me out that way, because he's been very finicky as to how I should refer to him. I'm saying that humorously. Him and I are friends. But the first time I made it into Western North Carolina, because I'd been trying for about a week to get out that way, and a field representative for AT&T's disaster relief team reached out to me. I would say it was a miracle as to how he even came to contact me. Another story for another day. But he had clearance that permitted us to go beyond the barricades of myriad towns out that way that folks such as myself would not be seeing or did not see for weeks. Some of these corners, I believe, are still roped off.
Yes.
So to explain that clip a little bit, we were fueling a generator. It must have been 4 a.m. on the potentially that was October 9th. Don't quote me on it. I am not trying to sensationalize this. I'm trying to be as factual as possible, and the facts of this matter are that it was graphic. It was horrific. It was terrible. He pulled me over a bridge over the Broad River, and he had parked his truck. And we're talking an entire mountain without power, right? So the stars were as bright as I saw at the Texas-Mexico border. I had not seen stars shine that bright since the Texas-Mexico border. Certainly no light pollution out this way. Certainly not now. He pulled his truck over this bridge, and the headlights shining bright. You could see just houses piled up on both sides of this bridge. I mean, they were towering stories into the air. And he rolled down the windows to his truck, and this aroma just filled the cabin, something I had never smelled before. He said, "Do you know what that is?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "That's death." That was the awakening for me that something is, I guess, literally not passing the smell test here. And it was after we went over the bridge, and we went as far into Lake Lure as we could, because it appears as though the river had washed some boulders onto the town, and I mean, you were physically landlocked. Stood there, took the video that we just showed. Looking back on it now, I wish I did better than that. Usually, I if it's an iPhone video, I'm not even going to use it. That was just for my own personal viewing, right? But that was our first stop on what became a 2-day, 48-hour trip with no sleep. I mean, how do you go to sleep after witnessing some of these sites? And I'll go you one further. I mean, how do you return home with a clean conscience after encountering so many wonderful mountaineers who don't even have one anymore? Much later that morning, I encountered a man who I've since kept in touch with every time I go up there. It's hard to just stay here sitting still when there's so much happening up there that nobody's talking about.
Right.
But I met an individual, Joe Bryant, and just speaking to the spirit of Appalachia, this man lost everything, and he did emphasize that he also lost his .22 rifle and crossbow. Tragic. But him and his little dog outran the storm, and we found him that morning sleeping in a tent, and he offered us water. That's the spirit I'm trying to emphasize here.
Right.
We
Right.
showed up with a truck full of supplies, and he was offering us something.
Wow.
Just through tragedy, I've experienced miracles beyond my wildest comprehension. Community building that I would never expect to see in a place like Dallas or Columbia, South Carolina. That would be neighbor v neighbor in a situation such as this, but not in Appalachia. So I suppose long-winded answer to your question, Travis. It was community helping community. It was community responding to community, and that's primarily what I'm seeing still.
Are you seeing it? Okay, so you still see it's just mainly community. I mean, fast forward to today? How has the recovery efforts changed? Do you have enforcement out there? Do you have roads fixed? Do you have checkpoints? Do you have readily available water and food? This is the United States of America. People are starting to figure out now, hey, there's issues in North and South Carolina. Melody's there. Where the heck is everyone, man? I mean, this is shocking.
Right. So there is semblance of military, i.e. the National Guard, are steadfast in taking scenic drives through downtown on their side-by-sides. The folks who I've spoken with, again, I'm primarily relying on community members at this point. The folks I'm speaking with, they say the boys are just joyriding. Working with the National Guard is like pushing a string. In fact, there was one individual I had met. He said, we twisted this whole team's arm to help us take water up the mountain, and we got there, and then a nurse helped us unload it. He said, so we left them up there.
I love that.
Let them find their way back. But I don't want to discredit what elements of FEMA are helping. But all right, what I've heard on the ground and what I've published. Joe Bryant, the individual I mentioned earlier, it took him 4 weeks for FEMA to finally offer him a hotel room 30 miles from where he lives. He doesn't have a car. He's already going back to work. He's riding a bicycle to work, and they offered him a hotel 30 miles away. The $750 checks. I've heard of some mountaineers ripping the checks up in FEMA's face following that magnificent, sweeping, heavy offer of $750. I have seen the FEMA camps myself. I've photographed a few of them. Of course, they're ways away from the catastrophe zones that I've seen. But for the most part, I mean, I don't see any federal response. I see none, personally.
Have you seen conflicts, any type of physical? Because it's hard to know what's fact and what's fiction. It's so polarizing. We have the elections. I've heard things where there was armed militants. It was just one person. So there's this whole misinformation thing going on. Can you go into, from whether you've seen it yourself or heard any testimony of any type of physical altercations or any type of violence?
Yes, and that was a question that was posed to me because that happened while I was up there, the incident you're referring to. And in fact, I was in that town when it purportedly happened. So I don't want to speak for everybody in Appalachia, but the general sentiment here is that we've been doing this ourselves. We've been doing a damn good job at it. And then 2 weeks later, FEMA decides to roll in, start commandeering the government municipalities that have been housing these life-saving supplies. In fact, I was provided a video to one the day that FEMA purportedly took it over. And then in the wake of backlash, FEMA plays victim, that was the last thing I expected to see. So sure, folks out Appalachia way carry firearms. And sure, they are speaking very candidly about FEMA, which quite honestly fits the description of the individual that was arrested for purportedly searching for FEMA. That's my immediate take on your question.
Okay.
So,
Andy, if I could ask you a question, the comments that you made about the smell when you were driving over the bridge, all right, that resonates with me. I've been to calls where people had been missing for a month. We found them in their house a month after they had passed away, and you never forget that smell. And it's kind of the same smell of the roadkill that you drive on the side of the road, right? You get that same odor, but it's different when you know it's coming from a person. That sticks with you. I remember having a fight or flight response. I mean, I didn't take off and run. I was more like fascinated, like, wow, a smell is making me have a fear response right now. It was kind of, when you step back from the emotion of it, it was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
But the death toll right now is being reported as somewhere around 230 from Hurricane Helene. When you say that smell, the smell of death, was there any indicator of the source? I mean, was it livestock? Was it wildlife? Or you just don't know at this point? I mean, you're kind of going down the road of, I kind of get where you were heading with that, but.
No, and you're absolutely right. And one thing I love playing with myself too is the devil's advocate. I will say that at this point, I have seen bodies, plural, 4 that I can count, and I have no intention of publishing any photos of that. Although the trolls are demanding it, that's too bad, because this is somebody's family. No, the source of the smell of death that I encountered at Lake Lure, on the Swananoa River, which was, oh God, was it pungent there? Next to a funeral home in Buncombe County. You're right. I cannot report beyond a reasonable doubt what the source of those odors were, but when you hear from so many first responders, and I'm using that in broad terms, because I am speaking routinely and frequently with individuals who either wear badges or are holding down desks in an official capacity, who don't want to go on record at this time, for a number of reasons, out of fear of losing funding, out of fear of perhaps gaining all the wrong kind of attention from FEMA. It's so unfortunate to hear a firefighter talk about how they need to regroup and redirect the supplies coming in out of fear of FEMA. A fire chief, no less. So to answer your question again, no, I do not know the source of those odors, but I have seen bloated remains, and I have heard from so many officials amplifying the same thing that you're hearing from community members.
Andy, what were they afraid of exactly? What you say they're afraid of FEMA? What were they in fear of? Their fire department being taken over, the municipality buildings? What were they afraid of?
Sure. So, I can't substantiate this, but just in talking with the officials who have been talking with officials, we are aware of one fire department, at least. I won't mention the county, where the chief and FEMA got into a bit of a dispute over the number of bodies. Chief was saying there's a whole lot more. FEMA is wanting to downplay the situation. So that buddied with the TikToks, by no means an official source, but the TikToks of community members discussing how FEMA has commandeered supplies. We saw it at Hickory Airfield. I had a volunteer who was working at the airfield when FEMA came in and said, we don't like the way this looks, so there's a new sheriff in town. And the supplies that were thereafter lost after FEMA commandeered it. I could pull up a video on my phone and share it if you'd like, of just the pallets and crates that were no longer in the community's hands. They were in FEMA's hands. I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but there is a major sense of concern and worry when it comes to FEMA once they finally show up, from the people I'm talking to.
Yeah, and I can actually, so I've only seen 2 FEMA sites really, and a very small one. And Jack and Travis, you remember I showed you those pictures. The people there were saying we're kind of slow rolling the filling up of the trucks, because when the trucks got full, they were supposed to leave and go to Bristol, Virginia, and so. But the idea, of course, was that the supplies were supposed to be for the locals. So that, I think that was also happening. And the communities, though, made a different decision and just started loading the trucks very slowly. So, yep. Yeah.
Andy, if you could real quick, the area where you were, I'm sorry to keep zeroing in on the smell, but this is a big issue for me. Could you describe the area? Was it rural? Was there a lot of farms nearby, or was this more of a wooded or suburban kind of setting?
So I can't speak on Lake Lure. I don't know the geography out that way. You know, I'm a South Carolina reporter. In fact, I had not experienced a North Carolina sunrise until I went up there with the AT&T fella. And I mean, it was just beautiful. What I can't get over is the beauty of this place. You know, you've got the trees, you got the leaves changing colors, you got the sun just beating through it, and then it reflects down on just an absolute catastrophe. It looks like Baghdad. That's not according to me. That's according to veterans who live out that way, who have additionally responded to their own capacities. I believe Buckham County to have. It's my understanding that it does have, you know, farm and farmlands, and some of the folks and SARS teams who are still out there at this time. In fact, I've got a call after we hop off here with another individual who's running cadaver dogs as we speak. One of their issues that they encountered was that they couldn't tell the difference, at least initially, between animal remains and human remains. So yeah, just to hone in on the smell a little bit more. Again, you don't know the source of it, but we were a block away from a truck or a refrigerator truck, and this is what really irked me a little bit. So again, I mean, I used to work in MSM, so I mean, I'm its biggest critic now. But we were about where CNN was doing a live hit, talking about a van that had overtopped. Here, look at this van. Back to you guys at the desk. And both my buddy and I, we were hit with that smell again, the same smell from Lake Lure. So we followed it, and it led to a reefer truck out front of a funeral home. It makes you wonder. We have made contact with several funeral homes at this time who don't want to go on record for whatever reason that I respect. They have provided us receipts. At least the funeral homes that we're talking with, they did not employ a reefer truck to house the bodies that were already there at the funeral home. I guarantee you, hundreds of people aren't dying in Swannanoa on a given day. There's the need for there to be a refrigerator truck with a 50-person capacity and at a local funeral home in Buckham County is simply not necessary. That is what some of my own MSM friends, I suppose, tried to push back on me. The body bags that the receipts to the body bags have been provided to us, not full body bags, but there was a nonprofit I had gotten in good with out that way. They claim to have distributed 10,000 body bags, but I didn't publish that. I published what we could substantiate, and what we could substantiate is that they distributed 640 body bags. These are just photographs of pallets of boxes of body bags that were requested by first responders and additional nonprofits out that way. So here are the receipts that a Fox affiliate said was untrue. I mean, they fact checked me directly. They said the number of body bags that my outlet reported was untrue.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're right that cadaver dogs they can't tell the difference, right? They're trained to zero in on decomposition, and decomposition smells regardless of the source. Mm-hmm. Body bags distributed. I mean, has there been any indicator about what is going in them? Because like livestock, mm-hmm. particularly vulnerable to floodwaters, whereas wildlife typically knows to get to high ground long before big dumb farm animals just stay in place until they drown. So could there be, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate mm-hmm. here. I mean, do we, you know, when you hear body bags, that has a connotation of human remains going in them. You're not saying that, but it's kind of like implied. Is there any indicator from any of these first responders about what's going in them? Or are they being used at all?
So I'm not going to show this receipt, but we know what went into these body bags here. So this is I'm not trying to, obfuscate here, but I mean, this is definitive. So we know what went into those at this local funeral home, or what was delivered to the local funeral home that provided us this. Now, I cannot speak sweepingly, if that's even a word, on what is going into all of these body bags in the event all of them are being utilized. But what a member of the nonprofit told me is that, quote, we're not distributing body bags for the hell of it. These are, again, body bags upon the request of myriad agencies out that way. So why they would just want to have an overstock of body bags is beyond me. But you're right. We don't know the source of the odors that I've encountered. We don't know what's happening with these body bags after they're sent out. Going to the cadaver dogs, and kind of a little off topic, but still on. One question posed to me, I forgot by who early on, we were talking about the scene out there, water, roads. So we still have, or I'm still in contact with folks who have cadaver dogs that are probing at this time. Like I said, I've got a call after we hop off this, and I'm very interested to hear what these individuals have to say. But they're having to limit just how much their cadaver dogs, as well as their teams, probe. You see, in fact, I lost my notes on this particular topic, but an environmental agency last month went and tested the mud that was blanketed across every corner of Western North Carolina that I've been to. And you see this mud is now turned into dust, which kind of gives it that desert storm feel, because a car drives through mine or FEMA's and it kicks up dust and it just looks like something apocalyptic. So they determined last month, after testing some of the mud in Swannanoa, that there are compounds in this sludge that you don't want in your body. And I didn't really think much of it, even after I returned after my third trip to Western North Carolina, and I got a little sick. I got a little lightheaded. Didn't think much of it. That's not going to hold me down. But then when I'm getting messages from folks saying, hey, have you heard this? Have you seen this? This is happening to me. And then I'm referring to our contacts out that way. And they're like, yeah, we've got to limit our cadaver dogs. They're getting sick. Our first responders are getting sick. It complicates an already complicating situation.
Andy, can I ask you a couple questions about buyout programs? One of the things that I wanted to do with Melody and Jack was go do some sampling on the soil. I think I may hold off on that. Seems like that my concerns were justified as far as the toxicity in the water and in the soil. But are you familiar with any current state volunteer or mandatory buyout programs? Are you familiar with any type of rezoning going on in those neighborhoods? Maybe they're not livable anymore. Maybe they're uninsurable anymore. Can you give us an update on any type of land ownership transfer?
Yeah, Travis, before we do that, I just want to back up something that Andy said. So I've spoken here, a local fire chief that was explicit that he himself had seen more bodies than they're counting, and that a lot of them actually were immigrants, and nobody was claiming them because here in Tennessee, immigrants were on both sides of the mountain. And so I just want to also confirm that I've spoken, with a first responder that says that as well.
If I could add to that as well. All right. So again, notwithstanding politics, but on the immigrants you just mentioned, there are two that we know of that will likely go unreported forever. These are two children that died of hypothermia following the storm, because remember, we're still talking thousands of people without power in Appalachia. And there is, just from some of the communities I've spoken with, there is concern, obviously, to report, not only because you're illegal, but because there are purportedly ICE trucks and Border Patrol that are encompassing the area. So to be fair, I reached out to some of my contacts at Border Patrol, because remember, I used to report with them back in Texas, in South Texas. And they're like, well, those individuals are likely in a responding capacity. They're not there for a law enforcement capacity. And I posed the question right to Border Patrol. Like, all right, if Border Patrol in their rescuing and recovering capacity were to encounter a family of illegals, what would happen? And he said likely nothing. So apropos of nothing, that was just an addition to what you said, Melody.
Right, but they're not gonna think that, right? If they
Right.
see an
Yeah.
ice truck,
Right.
if they I mean, that they're gonna be terrified, and so what they're
Mhm.
finding is people aren't claiming bodies, they're not telling who's missing, they're terrified, and so,
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, but I just wanted to say that because that's also something that I can confirm, but Travis, back to your question about the kinda
I'm
land
sorry.
grab.
We both cut
Oh,
off Travis, and I want to get to the buyout thing, but I don't want to get too far away from something you mentioned a second ago. Cadaver dogs getting sick in compounds in the mud. Do you have any other information, specifically what compounds are being
Sure.
found?
So it's funny. I participated in a podcast. Fitz News does a monthly live show, and I had all the notes relating to that, and I threw them away. I promise you, I'm not trying to withhold. To mainstream media's credit, they did report that, and I cannot think of the agency right now to save my life. But I assure you, I'm not just speaking out of terms here. The report I cited in our show yesterday, I can send it to y'all. There were two, if my recollection holds, there were two compounds specifically. Now, of course, mainstream said, it's nothing really to look into here, but I contest we should probably ingest zero compounds following any storm. I mean, the Asheville water supply, water reservoir, according to the water authority out that way, it was flipped upside down during this storm. The Asheville water remains undrinkable. There burn boils in effect. They're encouraging folks to add drops of bleach to the water and wait 30 minutes. And in the same breath, the Buncombe County Tourism Board is encouraging people to come because they're upon their own admission on the brink of some economic collapse by way of tourism dollar falling short this year. It is a 360 catastrophe. Now here I am. I'm getting passionate again. I do, Travis. I do. I would love to address what you just said about rezoning. But did I answer the question? Because I don't want to get too far off.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Andy, that was really good because I was talking to Jack, I think yesterday, and we're trying to figure out, and you're going to email us, but we're trying to figure out whether or not we should spend the money on investigating those types of things. So that was because it's very expensive to do those types of tests. It's about $300 per soil sample if you're going to send that to a scientist to actually research it. So we were going to go out to Kings Mountain, Cherryville, and Spruce Pine. And I was interested in those specific areas because Spruce Pine has the mine. Kings Mountain area has all of the lithium. They actually have an existing lithium mine that they're trying to drain and got permits to reactivate it. And so I was worried personally, being in Harvey and also in the Gulf of Mexico, we deal with bacteria and flesh-eating viruses all the time. So that's why I was like, I wonder what's in that water. And I wonder how many people don't realize the toxicity in that water. So I thought that may be something interesting. But I also was wondering if that would be a reason for the state to rezone and to force buyouts, especially if the contamination is right up against those mines. Like in Spruce Pine, there's residential neighborhoods right next to the mine.
So first and foremost, I would still, $300. I'm a penny pincher, but I'll help out on that. I would love to see more study of the mud and the sludge that is literally everywhere. In fact, Melody and I were talking last night on cleanup, and I was asking, tell me about the 9/11 cleanup, because I'm not comparing apples to oranges here, but I mean the aftermath of this thing is something you can't put in writing, you can't put it into words, and that dust is everywhere. Everybody's breathing it. The folks who remain steadfast in staying on their properties because they also fear that it could be commandeered, just such as what you just mentioned, they're breathing it, and they're living right next to a river that you're not allowed to drink out of, that you don't want to drink out of right now. I mean, we saw folks guiding dogs away from the river. I mean, that's how deadly and purportedly toxic this stuff is. But I would love to see more reports on what our first responders are ingesting and what our community members are ingesting, and the risks that they run by helping. I was trying to find a photo just now on my phone, and I think I knew I was going to send y'all way more than you needed last
Oh,
night.
I loved
Um,
it.
but yeah, there were some photographs of like massive industrial sized propane tanks that are twisted up like a wet towel, lodged somewhere deep in the forest that now has a rerouted river running right under it. Talk about how the landscape has changed. I mean, according to folks out that way, we saw Cane Creek, which typically runs 8 to 12 feet wide, run 400 feet wide. That's according to a fire chief. We had the Swananoa River rise 26 feet in a matter of minutes. That's not only according to eyewitnesses, but according to Mr. Weather himself. We cited that in a report as well. So, yeah, what does this look like for the folks on these banks in these newfound flood zones? Well, I reached out to Buncombe County Permit Office because, and I do believe there are photos in the trove I forwarded over, because I was curious seeing these placards placed all over the place. You had red placards, yellow placards, orange placards. Yellow placards reading something to the effect of dangerous, you could enter, but at your own risk. You had the other placard saying these areas have been checked. And then you got the red placard of death. That is damaged beyond repair. Do not enter. I've got myriad photos of that, and it was seeing these placards that prompted me to reach out to the permit office. So I'm a numbers guy. I love finding substantiating as much numbers as possible. So according to the permit office, they said that they've distributed, and this is for the county, of course, and I don't know how many properties are in the county, but I believe they've distributed, at the time I reached out to them last week, 1,500 placards. And they were
Yeah.
being a little ambiguous onto which colors each placard was. So I said, how many of these placards are red? They said, we can't provide an exact number, but about 35% are red. So we're
Wow.
talking 35% of the county that houses Asheville, saying that we've got properties, whether it be residential or commercial, that is bad.
One more thing, Andy.
Mhm.
Also something, so I've been thinking about all this, right? I'm not saying
Right.
necessarily that any of this is necessarily done on purpose, but I definitely think it's worth noting that what's going to happen to that land now? Is it going to go to the miners? Because then I started looking at the towns over there, Kings Mountain Town, and the current fight that they have with that lithium mine trying to come active again. And so there's this huge fight.
Right.
So that led me to access the records, like with you. Good job on that, by the way, Andy. I'm impressed. Another thing, though, for states that are disclosure states, one thing that's really helpful is going to the Central Appraisal District, because they give you public records of the ownership and ownership transfers. So because I didn't have a lot of time, I just put in lithium, right? I went on to the Central Appraisal District and I put in lithium to see what is the name of the owner. So I owner search. So if you find the lithium company, you put the lithium company's name in the owner search. And anyway, so I put in lithium, and the number one lithium provider, not in the US, in the world, ended up buying a whole bunch of land all around that area. And I'm like, what? I wasn't even looking for this company. This is a company out of nowhere. I was looking for these other companies, partially owned by Musk. Kamala Harris's husband is involved in this. There's a massive lithium land grab going on right now. I had no idea about until this hurricane happened. I started looking at the comments, and then I started going down that rabbit hole. I had to get out of the rabbit hole, man, because you go down to that rabbit hole too long, it messes you up, Jack. Anyways, I have concerns, Andy, and I don't, and it's hard to know whether or not they're justified, because my experience is here in Texas, and I see the craziness, the toxicity, I see the lack of FEMA, and then I saw the mandatory buyout program in Harris. In my county where I live, we actually have the biggest mandatory buyout program in the history of the US. That at least that's just recorded, right? So my concern is, they're like a pack of wolves out there. Those lithium miners are going to push, hopefully not through corruption, are going to push those areas that were destroyed. They're going to try to rezone them, maybe because they're contaminated, whether it's true or not. And they're going to take those people's property away from them and going to turn into rare minerals. Now, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I want to, you know, we want proof of this, but when I have those records of them purchasing land, and that's why I go back to you, you know, I don't want to go off too off of, you know, where we're at right now, but that's why I'm asking you, do you have any whiffs of these buyout programs? And also to give that tool to you, you know, you may want to go on that central appraisal district in that county. I think it's Gavin County. It's Gavin County, I believe. And you search those lithium companies and you see who purchased those lands. And they're purchasing a lot. Now I haven't gone into Spruce. I've only done about an hour research in the Kings Mountain, and the north of Kings Mountain, I believe, is Cherryville. Is that right?
That is correct.
And in Cherryville, there is a massive, massive project as well. So you got Kings Mountain. They're trying to reactivate. Sorry for the focus. They're trying to reactivate that lithium mine that's already there, and they're draining the water. So I'm like, well, did that water drain into the town? And then I was watching these Facebook meetings, Andy, where the lithium company that's trying to, it's called like Pendulum Lithium, I think. They're trying to reactivate that mine, and they're like going to the county meetings and saying, we're going to be here for the community. Anything happens to the community, we're going to help the community. So I'm wondering, have they helped the community? It has been wiped out. We have them less than a year ago saying that, hey, we're going to come here for you guys. Don't worry. We got you. Don't worry about your well water. It's not going to be contaminated. You're just saying there's sludge everywhere that's contaminated. You know, is my concern misplaced? I mean, and what are you seeing on the ground in those regards?
So as for what I'm seeing on the ground, I mean, it's funny. I had actually made an attempt to go visit. I'm going to botch the pronunciation of one of those lithium. Marby.
Albemarle, or yeah.
Okay, so we're familiar. That was one that had been in discussion by several folks out that way. Primarily them raising concern for that DoD announcement just last year. What was it? A $90 million partnership with the mine that I can't pronounce to save my life.
Well, there are multiple, Andy. There are multiple. There's also in 2022 a federal grant to push lithium mining because of China. So you have federal, you have Tesla, like, hey, we need more lithium. That's put in 90 million as well. So again, I had no idea. And then I tracked New Mexico. I don't even want to go there. Okay. But let's just say, to my surprise, because at first I was like, maybe this is a little bit of conspiracy theory. I didn't know. And then I looked up surface value. There's only one lithium mine that's active in the US. I'm like, you guys, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of lithium in China and in South America. But when you go in and you see the progress that they've been making over the last 3 years or 2 years, it is mind blowing. They have massive, giant projects, multiple projects saying that they're going to be the world supplier of lithium. Like they have the world supply in lithium. And that's not, you know, that's an also, again, I don't want to go there, but it's in New Mexico. I mean, they're everywhere, man. So where were the wildfires as well? There was
Wyoming.
Wyoming. I'm sorry. There's a huge lithium grab in Wyoming as well. So a lot of stuff you don't realize until you go down that rabbit hole.
And yeah, speaking on the rabbit hole, I mean, you can't help but venture down a little bit, and you know, the rabbit hole, it just leads you deeper and deeper by way of receipts. You know, I mean,
the math.
If you're, I mean, talk about the rabbit hole. I mean, I got there. Here's my rabbit hole. Don't
make us, man. We got the same thing, man.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, it is oddly convenient that Hurricane Helene stalled over this area of rare lithium producing towns in North Carolina. Absolutely. The exact location to what you just noted is the largest lithium deposit in the US. You know, it's my understanding that one of our main lithium arteries was Afghanistan, and well, we know how that played out. So now here we are. But yeah, without venturing too far down the rabbit hole, right? I can't speak to I can't speak on the mines. I do not know. I don't know enough to feel comfortable to speak on it definitively. I do.
Buyouts. Go back to the buyouts, then. Do you
sure. So I have seen one receipt that I didn't feel comfortable enough publishing. So and now here I am talking about it. Where it was essentially, and I mean, I couldn't tell whether it wasn't an eviction notice, but it was pretty much an order that you're not coming back. That's the most I've seen relating to that. And believe me, I've put feelers out all over the place. We're updated on, I kid you not, an hourly basis from the Rolodex that we have established in a very short amount of time. And I told him, like, hey, tell me if you hear anything about this, if you see anything about this. And that's when I was eventually provided that one thing that I just cited here. But I mean, there was so much unknown regarding that particular receipt that, I mean, it would have taken a week to substantiate it.
Well, I could tell you though, the North Carolina governor, before the hurricane got here, he's like, for property. After Helene comes, now he's encouraging North Carolina residents to sell out if they can. So I'm wondering in my mind
that clip from him, and I couldn't pinpoint the date. I didn't really deep dive it, but I'm sure we're all aware of the clip where he says, some communities don't need to be rebuilt. I mean, I heard that out of Cooper's mouth directly. Now, Grant, I don't know when he said that, but that is concerning when you've got Roy Cooper saying at an indeterminate time, some communities don't need to rebuild, in the wake of saying we've got at least maybe at least 10 people missing in North Carolina. Okay, well, yeah, maybe take that number and multiply it by 100, then we'll be a little bit closer to what is being amplified by, again, the folks with badges and the folks with deaths who aren't going on record just yet.
Yeah. And I heard, so, I heard a story from a local pastor. He had just talked to a couple, an elderly couple, that they were told that they couldn't come back. They couldn't rebuild. They'd been rezoned. And so I also wonder if, and Travis, I know you did all this research into the mandatory buybacks, if they make them sign an NDA with the sale, because that is something that they would do. And tell them not to disclose the funds and things like that. So
then we got the title company, Andy. That's what I'm saying. You stay on that appraisal district. It's a CAD, whatever that Gavin CAD, because they will tell you and show you ownership transfer. I can't do it in Texas because it's non-disclosure. I don't like that about Texas, but so stay on top of him. I already see multiple lithium companies, #1 in the world, and there's none that it's like FTC or something like that. They're already purchasing. So my question is as well to that governor, what communities is he referring to? Is he referring to the communities that are zero lot line practically to these mines? Because that's my concern, right? Are those the communities, or we talk about communities in the middle of nowhere? I don't want to be insensitive, but what I'm trying to zero in on is, are these people going to get bullied out of their homes when they could potentially rebuild them up?
Right.
There's a lot of questions I have, right? And without those receipts,
so
it's a lot of speculation.
For folks who may be wandering a little late, what Travis is talking about here, lithium, obviously electric vehicles is a very big thing for use in batteries. But the Defense Production Act has been evoked for lithium. It has become a national security issue for the country because right now we get all our lithium from China. Obviously, things not very simpatico there. So long before this storm hit, lithium has become a national priority for the whole economy, but in particular associated with defense. And this storm, this damage was like bullseye in Lithium Central in the United States. And what, Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're alluding to is we want to make sure that the financial interests of the lithium industry are not influencing political decisions that might lean towards pushing people out of their homes and off of their land. And, oh, well, since the people aren't there anymore, look, we can get the lithium that's under it now. And because it's important to keep them honest in this situation here.
We have a dirty history of that exact thing happening. So, I think that concern is a justified, even from a mathematical standpoint, that's a justifiable concern. Well, I am not saying that they have a remote control necessarily, and they're controlling hurricanes, although the Iona zone, we won't go there with HARP. I've looked into that. I don't think anyone should be messing with it. All right. Well, I'm just going to say, I'll say this. It's very suspicious. And I don't think people should be messing around with the Iona zone like that, with the microwave. And I won't go there. It's a really crazy rabbit hole, though. If you want to go down that, I don't suggest you go down that rabbit hole, though.
But there is, to the point, though, there's so much wealth underground in this area. It's not a crazy conspiracy theory to imagine greedy people may try to take advantage of these people's misfortune with this storm to try to get at what's underneath their land. So, there needs to be vigilance there. Questions need to be asked. People need to be poked and prodded, and that's going to make some people uncomfortable. And so you're going to get pushback when you look into that. And that's why I'm not surprised to see things like the MSM is, talking about receipts you may or may not have, Andy, because I have asked questions that make people uncomfortable in the past, and I've seen pushback from the mainstream on the same issue. This mind guarding, the protecting of the groupthink that happens, it's very real. So, I think.
And isn't it odd that we got that story this past week about the, our rich folks experimenting with the aerosols? I mean, that came out just, after everybody's talking about these conspiracy theories and how crazy everybody is. You get an article that Bill Gates is involved in one of these experiments.
Yeah, the plot of the freaking Matrix, and they're like seriously considering this. This was not a blueprint. This was science fiction. Don't try it.
It's crazy.
But yeah, I saw that article that they're actually looking into blocking out the sun. Okay, what could possibly go wrong?
Right. Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
I'll put the hat on again. I will.
Yeah.
I like the hat, man. Where can I get one of those? At this rate, I need one.
Merchandising. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, on Jack's channel you can get it.
Yeah.
So
All right, then.
yeah. But no, Andy, you've been so generous with your time. And it's just, again, I cannot thank you enough because I have felt crazy. And I've seen all the things you've seen. I didn't get to go, behind the lines. I've only been able to go where they'll let you go. And what I've found so fascinating about all of this, because where he was talking about seeing FEMA in the Escalades, guys, that is on the other side of the quartz mine, just so you know. Like that's where Burnsville is. And so, I just, it is so crazy that they spent so much money on the police that are guarding these barriers to get, as soon as you get close, just a little closer, you can't get up there. You can you're always downstream from whatever has happened, and you can see the piles of cars and things like that, but you can't get up to the damage. I mean, I was only able to get to Spruce Pine, 2 weeks ago. So there's just so many areas if you don't have connections, you cannot get to. And so it's just been very frustrating, just trying to report on this, trying to talk. And then the other thing that Jack, he asked me a question that I hadn't thought, I don't know why I didn't think about it, but he's like, well, are the people still there in Spruce Pine? And I was like, well, no, they're not. I mean, I was thinking about downtown Spruce Pine, walking around, and there was no one around. There was a ministry serving food, but that they didn't have anybody there. And he's like, get the word out. And I was like, absolutely. They were serving hot food, but nobody's there. And so I think a lot of people have left. And so again, we just don't have good information. So I've just been so grateful. But Andy, are there anything that we didn't talk about, or anything you want to say about your experience today?
About the Western North Carolina experience or the Doomers News Network experience? No, I mean, I thought this was a pretty substantial conversation, y'all. I mean, I sincerely appreciate you reaching out, Melody, and just to promote a little bit here. Melody, I believe you initially reached out because I was imploring people who have services or materials to provide to reach out for a live feed article that is live on our article right now, titled "We Can Help Service Offerings to North Carolina." You see, in the 3 non-consecutive weeks that we had been reporting, that would have to be a searched article. That's not going to, unfortunately, be on the homepage there. But you could see just how our reporting has resonated with so many people. People from Boston to Alaska have reached out to our South Carolina-based alternative media outlet, asking where can I go or what can I do to help? Because right now that is exactly what Appalachia needs. The Mountaineers are proud people. They are not going to ask for help. I have watched where team members have to twist their arms to make them take a singular can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup. This is just so out of everybody's comfort zone, not only what has happened after this storm, but kind of the awkward place it would put anybody in. So yeah, folks, whether they say they do or not, they need the help. We had been following two individuals specifically who met while they were out there, informally known as the Generator Girl and the guy helping the Generator Girl, who you had actually played Trey O'Hara's clip or interview that I did with him on y'all's last show, I believe,
Yes.
where he talked about seeing body bags stacked this high and 50 feet deep. And his testimony is just it's amazing and terrifying at the same time. The things that he has seen after responding the weekend of the hurricane in Western North Carolina, in Fairview, and finding his way up to Mitchell County. So we're efforting a magnum opus piece there. I don't know what it's going to be called. I don't know the direction of it yet. I like to think I'm a pretty fact driven reporter person, but there are the facts right now are so ambiguous. I don't exactly know what the direction is here yet, but I think I had forwarded over a new clip of our sit down with the Generator Girl and Trey. I don't know if that was of interest to be played here,
Yeah.
but
Could we do that, Travis? That's the longer clip, real quick, before he goes.
I think it would be about a minute and 30 seconds. It was in the
Yeah.
Google Drive.
Yeah, he's got it. That's it.
Okay.
Go to the beginning of it.
This one's
No, not that one, Travis.
It's neither here nor there, but
It's the one
in the
Google Drive. Yeah, it's in the Andy folder, Travis. It's the one that
all right.
It was the two people.
If we can't get to, I know I'm putting y'all on the spot. No worries there.
While we're bringing that up, Andy, there was a lot of chatter in the live chat about the poster over your shoulder there, the Thompson for Sheriff poster. Could you give us a 20-second crash course on that? Because there's a good story there, I think.
All right, 20-second crash course. As any teenager, they're obviously infatuated with Hunter S. Thompson. Who wouldn't be infatuated with an absurd writer going to Las Vegas and writing about drugs and sex and money and everything in between? So I fell in love with his writing, his reporting style, and of course, he died long before I got interested. So I reached out to his widow, Anita Thompson, who still resides over at Owl Farm, and I said, "Listen, is there any way I can get one of those Thompson for Sheriff posters, which reshaped Colorado politics following 1970?" And she sent me one. You can't see it. She signed it. She stamped it from Owl Farm. So obviously a prized possession there. If the office catches on fire, I'm probably going to grab that. Maybe a few playing cards over that direction. But there's the crash course.
I'm going to put this up.
Direct from the widow. That's crazy.
You guys tell me where this is at. And I see your football card back there. I wanted to ask you about that football card. I think it's football. I don't know.
It's not. It's the second movie file that you didn't play. You played one, so
the
longer one.
Clip MIR.
Yeah, that's
would
it.
Be it.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Helene clip MIR. He's saying.
Yeah, that's what I just said. I thought.
That's it.
The main thing that we're doing is helping the people from the devastation of the hurricane. We had generators shipped in here from the airport, and the electricians are going out and wiring up the generators for the people that have no power. People without power, of course, have no heat. It snowed here Wednesday. They were freezing. People came in with their little children just shivering. We've offered jackets. We've offered blankets. It's gonna take a while for something to be normal here again. His generator's already restored, so take a picture of this right here.
It's no smiling, no laughing matter. There's a bunch of held back tears around here. Here, I'm also helping out, and that is to hook up the generators to get power back to the houses that don't have power. And every day I go out, and it's amazing how much damage was done. This is my first time here, and man, I am in awe. It's there's a bunch of stuff down, but it's still beautiful, even in all the mess. I've met some wonderful people, but God bless you, sir. I would gladly trade those friendships for this to never have happened. But we're past that now. Now what?
just a little bit. That video does not have the chef's kiss or anything. I had whipped that up yesterday morning for our little podcast, but that's just kind of an idea of the stories of the real folks out there, the real folks making a difference out that way.
Very powerful.
Now what is a pretty powerful line.
Yep.
You know, you got your
It is.
$700 check, or you know, you got some clothes donated, but that doesn't replace a whole life that got taken away in a mudslide. Like, what the hell do you do in that situation? It's
Right.
going to be a long time for some of those folks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, Andy, thank you so much for your time, and I definitely want to hear about this conversation you're about to have with the cadaver dogs as well. And you know, we're working on planning this trip for Travis and Jack to get here. I can't wait because you know they're just going to be able to help tell the story. Travis is really good videographer, and so he's very good at that stuff. So looking forward to that. And who knows, maybe we might be able to meet you in person sometime or something like that. That would be fantastic. We would love that. So thank you so much again. And guys, yeah, check out Fitz News. I'd never heard of it before. It's a great little publication. And I feel like it was a miracle that I found your video. And this has been an incredible talk and discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, hey, thank y'all. This is a very talented council, so I sincerely appreciate y'all taking an interest in just a little alternative journalist over here. So you know, if folks want to follow me a little bit more, Real Andy Fancher on all mediums. Real Andy Fancher on Facebook, X, Instagram. That's where I try and publish in as much real time as possible some of what I'm seeing out that way, as well as some of our corrupt cops here in South Carolina. But I sincerely appreciate y'all giving me the time here to talk about what I've seen out that way. You know, Melody, you too brought me out a bit of a funk that I was having last week, just in response to some of the media backlash, some of what I've seen out there, some of what people have told me. So thank y'all for that, and keep me posted on y'all's journey up north, or for me up north.
Will.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll do, man.
Will
Great
do.
work,
Thank
Andy.
you, Andy. Great work.
Hey,
Thank you
y'all.
so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Bye. Whoa.
That was powerful.
It really
Steve,
was.
you see why I was concerned about the soil, Jack? You see?
I
what I'm
do.
saying
You
about
know,
soil?
I'm really curious what compounds. That's the first I've heard of it. I mean, I could go either way because, you know,
It's
like
expensive.
coming from nuclear, the thing about radioisotopes is they're everywhere. They're naturally occurring and they're incredibly easy to detect. So if somebody is starting from a position of, I want to make a mess in the press, you can go buy a cheap radiation meter and then buy some freaking bananas at the supermarket, make the thing cackle and say, see, there's radiation from the nearby nuclear plant, when really it's just potassium-40 from the bananas that's naturally occurring. So some things are really easy to detect, but then there's thresholds where, okay, above this limit, it's generally considered harmful. And then there's always people who say like, well, no amount of anything is acceptable. So that definitely got my attention when I heard that there's compounds in the mud. Now, you know, that's like saying there's stuff in the mud. What compound and how much of it? What's the source of those compounds? That's very interesting. And
we'll get you taken care of,
I
Jack,
would
when we
really
go out there.
I'm really interested in hearing more about that, especially the cadaver dogs getting sick. I don't know how common that is. I mean, if they're sticking their noses detecting bodies, maybe they're inhaling, you know, pathogens and things like that, or maybe there is something in the dust. It's worth looking in.
I got some comments up here for you, Jack. You want to read those?
Yeah, Spud Ruckus. Thank you, Spud. I love the name, by the way. And every time I hear Ruckus, I ask myself, could you describe the Ruckus? What movie? Let me know in the comments. But he says, be sure and watch James O'Keefe's FEMA whistleblower video from yesterday. I haven't seen that one yet, Spud. Thank you. But I am a fan of O'Keefe's work. It says, sweet woman, very brave. We can't forget these people. Still need so much help. So thank you, Spud. If you wouldn't mind, I don't know if it'll let you, but could you maybe put a link to that in the live chat? If you have that video, I'd like to check that one out. Or if not, you could email us, and that would be good as well. Thank you for supporting the channel.
Thank you so much.
One more for you, Jack.
Cameron Wright, thank you for supporting the channel. Says, me and my wife are having our 5th baby. Congratulations, you're an animal. 5. So, you know, we after 4, when you have a 5th, science, we know what causes that these days. I'm just throwing that out there, Cameron. But congratulations. It says, and your first son. Okay, now I should have kept reading. Now I understand why there's a 5th. And that's Gigi's worst fear, by the way, because I always wanted a boy and we had 2 girls. Gigi was done. And I was like, well, we could try again and maybe have a son. And she said, nope, we're going to end up with 6 daughters and no sons. So we were done after 2. I didn't get the rest of it. I said, keep it based here in Texas. Love you guys. Thanks for looking out for my family. Well, thank you so much for your time and for supporting the channel, Cameron. Again, congratulations to you and the missus and the family. And wow, 5 kids. So you got to play a zone defense when you have 5 kids. There's no man-to-man coverage there. Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
Very good. Melody, anything else before we go to next segment?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Well done on finding him. Well done on finding him. I'm really glad. I'm really glad, especially when he was saying the things about the mud and the water, because again, I mean, that's just right after less than 24 hours after Jack. And I'm like, Jack, fine. But I mean, you know, it happens all the time here in Houston. People are going to the hospital all the time for contamination in the water. We have hurricanes and we're not even next to any mines, although the refineries. So I think our next segment is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go in, guys, right now. Let me put the timestamp. So everything will be timestamped on this video. You guys can come back at your good graces. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the unemployment and labor market. And we're going to start. A lot of information came out over the last couple of days, and a lot of it was inconsistent. So I'm hoping we can get a little bit more clarity here. And please, Jack, Melody, interrupt me if you want to add anything here or you have any questions, because this is a little bit confusing. Now, I want to start by the unemployment rate going to 4.1%. That was November 1st. So this was happening on Friday. Now, the first thing I want to point out is the previous recessions. Looking at the past 3 previous recessions, the unemployment was under 4%. You guys see that right here. Now, I hate including 2020 because it was a lockdown, so it's kind of artificial, but it is what it is. Unemployment was under 4% there. Unemployment was under 4% right here as well. You guys see that going into the recession. Same thing with the dot-com bubble, under 4%. So in other words, the better indicator as far as unemployment having to do with recession is the trajectory of unemployment, not necessarily, unless it's like crazy high, 6, 7, 8, whatever, right? But the trajectory of unemployment is recessionary. And the trajectory of the unemployment right now is going up. And again, you see the previous recessions, unemployment goes up into the recession. Unemployment goes up into the recession, up into the recession. It doesn't go down into recession. It goes up into the recession. It goes down generally shortly after the recession, right? So you see it keeps going up after the recession and then goes down. So even though it is low, historically, unemployment is actually low going into recession. I wanted to make that clear to everyone. But here's the crazy thing. The establishment survey also came out. And Jack, again, come in here if you have anything you want to add. But the first thing that I wanted to point out is the total amount of jobs that were added when all is said and done was 12,000. I believe it was the Wall Street's expectation was under 200. I think it was like 140. Do you remember, Jack? 140, 160?
I believe 115, but I can get you that number in short order.
Okay.
Here.
It certainly was not 12. So it was an embarrassment, in other words. But here's where I also want to show you guys. So I went down this list, and if you guys see, it breaks it down on where the unemployment is coming from or where jobs are being created. Now, when I go down this list, the first thing that surprised me was construction. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys this here in a minute. Now, if you guys look here at construction, and here's the thing, that this is the reason why I'm bringing this up. Okay. A lot of people are saying that we've already been in recession. I understand why people are saying that because of the government intervention. So if we're to have that line of thinking, then I would say then we've been in recessions. We never got out of recession since 2009. If we're going to base that on government interference, we've been in recession. If we're going to base this on technical recession, then technically we have not been in recession. And I would add to that, technically, the inflation. I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing the evilness of the inflation. We're seeing how, because this is the first time in my adult life, I'm in my 40s. I've never had a situation like this where the inflation is keeping everything sticky. It's deteriorating the middle class. It's making the elite and the bankers rich while everyone else is struggling and hurting. And so a lot of people point us to this data set with construction. construction jobs. They're like, if construction jobs go down, the whole economy will go down. So I wanted to point out, this is the first time, according to the establishment survey, where we see construction jobs go down and go down significantly, going from 27,000 jobs added to now 8,000 jobs added. Okay, that is a big deal, because when we look here, and this is the other thing, Melody, because I know me and you, we always talk about when do we enter recession. I'm like, I don't know if we've entered it yet, unless we count government intervention, then we've been in it. Here's the interesting thing about recessions and construction jobs. It peaks and goes down into recession, generally. Okay, so if we're in recession right now, I just want to make a point that unless they change this data, right, they could change all this data. All right, so I understand that, but we haven't technically, there's no trend indicated yet to where construction jobs are going down. They're still going up. I'm just pointing out a recessionary indicator. Okay, again, look at this. So as you see here, 1990, construction peaks right here and goes down into recession. Same thing here in the dot-com bubble, recession peaks and goes, these are jobs, goes down into recession. Same thing here with the great financial crisis, construction jobs peak and go down into the recession. Look at, guys, we haven't yet peaked, but what I am suspicious of is we may have just hit the peak. We don't know, this data is all over the place, but according to the establishment survey, this is the first time where construction jobs are basically in the gutter. So I'm wondering, next month, are we going to see a negative here? And if we start to see a negative, then we can safely assume, all right, we're headed into the recession. If we're only looking at this data, I'm just presenting you guys with additional data as it pertains to the labor market. Construction jobs are a big part of recessions, okay? So going back here, here's another interesting thing I wanted to point out to you guys, government jobs. All right, so we got 12,000 net jobs, right? So we had a growth of 12,000, but 40,000 of those jobs were government jobs, okay? So my point in telling you guys this is without, you see my point, Melody? It's just like, if we're going to talk about the government intervening, we've been in recession. To me, this points out that, and we can safely say with the math, no assumptions, no tinfoil hat, if it was not for the government intervention, then the job market we would have seen negative in the job market. Okay. But we didn't see that. We saw growth. 40,000 jobs were government. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. Interestingly enough, when we look at the year-to-date change of job cuts, look at who is leading in 2024 for job cuts. Anything stand out? Anything? Government, right? The amount of government jobs year over year, the job cuts is over 2,000%. So I don't know if they're hiring to buff up the numbers and then they go around and fire people. But one thing we know for sure, looking at the math, there is no niche that is laying off people at a rate like the government is when we only look at the year over year. All right. The tech industry has laid off more number of people, but we're looking at 1 year to the next, and you see the government interference right here. Okay. So to me, that's proof positive. They're manipulating the numbers, but let's just keep going. All right. So when we go into the Challenger report,
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second there?
Yeah.
Let's back on the government jobs. I just want to emphasize, guys, because there's always a lot of commentary around government jobs, and it's always in the context of like big government federal spending, but that's not what we're seeing here. These are mostly local government, state and local government jobs that are going away. There's a lot of stories about layoffs in schools because enrollment is down. By the way, shout out to our buddy Cameron again, who's doing his part to try to fix that problem. But enrollment is way down in schools because the birth rate is down and homeschooling is on the rise. And also a lot of rural area hospitals are still run by municipal government authorities. And as those shut down, that's a lot of government jobs that are lost. So, you know, that trend of government jobs lost, even though, you know, some people like to say, oh, it's all federal government. It's really a state and local thing. I just want to emphasize that point because I see a lot of people get that one wrong.
Right, but not according to this data. According to this data, it's separate. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, we haven't actually broken out into education right here and healthcare right here. We have pharmaceutical right here, and we have a separate category for government right here, which corresponds to the 2,000% increase, which to me would indicate that that is not counting education. Would you agree with that? Education's right here.
I would have to see, are they talking about private education jobs or you know, and
Right.
private healthcare jobs. I'd have to get into Challenger. That's a good point, Travis. I'd have to get into the fine points and the fine print on their reports to see if they separate out private versus public education and healthcare, because that does fly in the face of what I just said, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But that's all right. This was my report. No, we talked about this on one of our videos. That's how I knew. But nevertheless, this is still there. So we could say it's state, we could say it's federal. It doesn't matter what we say. What we're talking about is the year-over-year change, you know, going parabolic right now. Because it's very suspicious when at the same time they're leading the job growth. So again, on one hand, they're leading with job cuts, but on the other hand, they got 40,000 jobs that they created in just 1 month. And I can pull up the WARN mass reporting system that shows hundreds and hundreds of job layoffs from the, and I don't want to get political, but from the Democratic Committee. I could show you that right now. I could pull up a WARN system right now, and it's not Republican, it's just Democrat. Try not to get political. I get roasted all the time for not picking a side when really I pick the side, which is you, the viewers, and my community. So anyways, anything else right there?
Just that Challenger only counts job cuts. Challenger doesn't count job additions. So it's possible that Challenger has the cuts, but then the non-farm payrolls report, those cuts are offset by additions elsewhere. That's a possible explanation.
You know what? You may be right. All right. So let me go on to this report, though.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Jack. Melody, anything? Come on, Melody, jump in here, girl. All right.
I will at the end.
All right, I thought you were going to say something. All right, so here we go. So this came out October 31st. Couple of paragraphs I want to lead, and I'm going to just show you guys some data points here. So the first paragraph, U.S.-based employers announced 55,600 roughly job cuts in October, down 23% month over month. However, and this is the big thing here, guys, okay, it's up 51% year over year. So I went back and I looked at what unemployment was last year, and it was 3.8%. All right, so unemployment goes from 3.8 to 4.1, and we have 51% more job cuts. All right, you may want to look into that. It's very suspicious, but let's keep going here. So this other thing here, October total marks the 7th time this year, and there's only been 10 months, right? So 7 out of 10 months, the job cuts announcement have been worse year over year. And if you go back to basically see how it compares with history, this is the highest year-to-date total since, and we can't really count this, 2020. And I say we can't count that because we were locked down. So it's kind of tainting the data. So if we exclude that, the worst it's been since was 2009, when the year-to-date was at 1.192. In other words, we're nearing recessionary job cuts right now. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys that here in a minute. So let me kind of zoom out here. I'm trying to go through so quickly because Melody's story, that's a really tough act to follow. That guy was just so good. He really moved me. Honestly, all I want to do now is just stay down the rabbit hole of the hurricanes and figure out like where we're going to go visit and how we're going to get this water. That's all I want to do right now. Honestly, I don't even want to talk about this. We already talked about this. But anyways, here's the leading job cuts. There's the top 5 industries for year-to-date job cuts. Leading is obviously technology. That is down year over year. Okay, so they're not firing as many people, but they're still firing a lot of people. Surprisingly, and I think we should really go more into this, Jack. And I know both Jack and Melody have been covering Stewart Healthcare. We've done a couple of videos on healthcare as well, and GoodRx. But healthcare layoffs are crazy as well. That's actually number 2, which is and I think that has to do with the unaffordability. And then number 3, services, 4, financial. And there's the government right there. And again, look at the comparison. The year-over-year comparison is just absolutely brutal. One last thing I want to show you guys on the Challenger report is the quarterly job cuts. Okay, so here's the quarterly job cuts right here. Okay, that's the first quarter. And again, if we exclude this right here, because that's lockdown, so if we exclude that row, and you guys do this yourself, you can come back and you can do this yourself, you can see how each of the quarters so far this year in 2024 compare with history. And if you go, just starting with the first quarter here, if you look for 257, the last time we had that number, again, 2009. So my point is we're very close as far as the labor market, even with that 4.1% unemployment, we're very close to the aftermath of the last recession. If we look at before the recession in 2006 and 2007, you can kind of see it in 2005. But it's very interesting, because what you see happen going into the great financial crisis is you saw the job cuts, and this is very interesting. Jack, Melody, maybe we could chime in here. Look at this. So you see the job cuts going down into the recession. Is that because there's no one left to cut? Is that what we see there? I mean, why would job cuts go down into the recession and then explode in 2009? Do y'all notice that? So they could have made the narrative to keep people spending that, hey, the labor market's getting better. Job cuts are down big. And these are big job cut. This is a big decrease from 2006 to 2007. Look at that. It's a 60,000 decrease in one quarter. So it's difficult to get a gauge, but do you guys any idea on why that might be?
Travis, again, keep in mind, Challenger only counts cuts. It's not net change in jobs. And typically the job cuts really spike after the recession has already started, right? The hiring may slow going into the recession. And that's why you see the unemployment rate on that chart that you showed with the unemployment. It typically starts to rise very slowly. And then all of a sudden it spikes when all the layoffs hit all at once, right? So you see the chart turns up very slowly, and then wham, once you're in the recession, that's when it really hits fast, right?
Yeah.
Unemployment is low until it isn't, and then it leaps higher.
But speaking to your, go ahead.
Melody, please.
Well, speaking to your question though, Travis, I think a lot of people knew in 2005 that something was up with the economy. I mean, that, definitely in housing, but I think that people were really working overtime back then as well, trying to convince everybody that weakness wasn't there. So, I did that. I can see that. And in mortgage, like we did our, we did our first huge cut. We'd had some cuts, but it was in 2007. But the slowdown had already really started to take place. And so, I think that what you're saying, because when I study historical housing data, we really, really, really should have started seeing price impacts in 2006, in my opinion, because the weakness had already started. So I think, you can go back. I have an article from 2007 that talked about how we didn't have enough inventory and all kinds of things. So I think the same kind of machinations were going on as well back then, trying to keep hopium alive,
It's very intriguing seeing, that hit me off guard. It really did, because 2007's when the end of 2000, technically, right? I think it was December 2007 was our technical recession. So to see like Q1 2005 to Q7 of 2007, again, we're not talking about net, we're talking about cuts, drop by 100,000 in just one quarter. That's surprising, which means, again, this is not the only indicator that we should be watching.
Did I catch a Q7 of 2007 in there just now? That was a crazy year. It had 7 quarters.
Wait, what is it?
I think you said Q7 of 2007.
Oh,
I think you meant to say
I'm sorry.
Q4.
You know what? I got too many
years. It had 7 quarters. We were totally unprepared for that.
Welcome to my reality, buddy. Okay, it's called having a lot of kids. All right, let's keep going. Now, here's one of the reasons why I'm bringing up the labor market and the housing market. I think that the labor market, I think this is fair for us to say without getting any conspiracy or anything like that, that the labor market and the housing market are linked, because we have to be able to afford our mortgage payments and the tax increases and the HOA and the homeowners insurance increases. And so I find that this data set right here is really good data set to make that point, because what you guys are seeing here is the mortgage delinquency rate and the unemployment rate. And the interesting thing here, it almost tracks perfectly. Isn't that crazy? So, it's not perfect, but let me see, the orange line is the unemployment rate. The blue line is the delinquency rate. So although I don't necessarily think that it's this low, as according to the pulse surveys that Melody has discovered, like, thank God for you, Melody. Like, we also have the HUD surveys that show that it's way worse. So we have multiple surveys actually that show that the situation is much worse. But the interesting thing is it still tracks, right? So even though this is only saying 3.9 and 3.8, the pulse surveys are saying like 6%, and they're saying the unemployment is high. Those are kind of going together as well. So it's like, it's so hard to decide, especially if you're a professional in real estate and you're an honest person. If your leading data provider only has 30% of the data and they're cherry picking it, I mean, what do you do? It's hard. Who do you believe if you're a professional, right? So anyways, it does track. I thought that was interesting. But another reason why I'm bringing this up is there's so much right now in this world, and not just in the US, that is hedged on the values of homes sustaining and normalizing. And what I'm saying is not only is that not true, we've had multiple times in history, even going back to the 1800s, where we've had massive home price crashes. The potential risk, this is what I'm trying to say, the potential risk for a collapse in prices is we've never had this type of risk from a PE ratio, payment to income ratio, consumers' ability to repay ratio. And we look here, we kind of see that with the Case-Shiller and CPI matched up. Okay, you see the home price growth really, I mean, geez, my God, man. I mean, I'm still shocked. I'm still in shock that the inflation has kept this going for so long, which makes me feel like the last housing market crash was more a result of the banking system than it was a foreclosure crisis in the consumer. Go figure. Maybe the inflation really is a huge issue. And let's see. And that's all I have on the labor market. My point there is here's the thing. And here's what I wanted to talk to you guys. Maybe I should pull up this pulse survey showing 20% unemployment, Melody, or
Sure.
no? Okay, I'm going to pull up this real quick, Jack, and I'm going to show you guys one last thing, and I want to get your opinion. Like, what the hell? Like, why is this data all over the place? What can we trust? Let me show you this, Jack. Melody knows this. I'm always texting Melody, like, oh my God, Melody, look what I found. Well, really, Melody found this for me. I'm just dovetailing on Melody's work here. Let me close this out. So take a look at this. So Jack, what you're looking at here is something called a pulse survey. This is a new set of surveys that were brought forth through COVID. It's a rapid response survey. It's a 20-minute online survey. And what I've
And the
done
response
here,
rate is going up. It's the response rate is going up. So completely against the trend of all the other surveys where response rates are going down. Yep.
yeah, because this is probably more a real survey, talking to real
Right.
people about their concerns. But let me
Right.
show you what I did. So here's the amount of people that are unemployed, 53 million. And what I did is I took out all of that 45 million people right there because they're over 64. So I'm removing this from this total number. So the real number is 99 million. But just to be fair, okay, just to give them a little bit of fat on there, I remove that out, and I'm only using 53 million people unemployed. Okay, follow me, because I'm removing this group out of the equation, and that equals 20% unemployment. All I have to do is divide the 53 million people that are unemployed according to the survey into the total response of 250 million. That's 20% unemployment. So either this survey is wrong, or the other survey is wrong, or they're both wrong, and the unemployment rate is somewhere in between. What do you think about this stuff?
So I can tell you there's a million different little nuances to the unemployment data, like the way they do the non-farm payrolls. They measure people 16 and over, but not people retired. So when you're saying 65 and under, does that count kids under 16?
Nope,
Probably shouldn't count them on unemployment. So
nope, does not count that.
Yeah. And so I guess the point is, like, there's a million little questions like that you have to sort out to really get what it's saying. The unemployment rate, like the number that gets reported, the one that was reported as 4.1%, like that doesn't count people who are not working and not trying to work. Well, why? People who left the workforce and gave up on finding a job. Why do we no longer count those people as unemployed? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
So there's a million of these little caveats that are attached to the unemployment data. U6 unemployment is generally viewed as the best measure that the government puts out. And I've never really parsed the pulse survey. 20% sounds a little high to me. I'm not going to lie. So I'm guessing there's probably a big chunk of the population that the government just automatically excludes that's being included in those pulse numbers there. But I would also add that within this unemployment rate that we just got, the mainstream talking point was unemployment rate was unchanged at 4.1%. But that's hiding a statistical anomaly. The unemployment rate actually went from 4.05 to 4.14. So both of those numbers get rounded to 4.1%, but it's masking an increase of almost 0.1% unemployment, or about 160,000 people that went on the unemployment rolls last month. So the unemployment rate is rising regardless of which data point you look at and which one you use. But that's an important nuance.
Yeah, that one's showing 5 times more unemployment. What do you think about that? What do you think about the situation, Melody? I mean, like, I'm not at a loss for words here.
Yeah. I saw somebody in the comments saying they didn't know anybody that's unemployed. I mean, I know several
I
people
do.
that are unemployed. I know several people that left the workforce and aren't, maybe they're doing odd jobs like lawn care, but not even, officially. I think the gig economy hides so much of this. And perhaps, if you're an Uber driver or a DoorDash driver, when you're asked if you're employed, maybe you say no because, and we're seeing all over social media, Uber drivers, DoorDash saying they can't get rides, they can't get orders. People are fighting. Now, I think DoorDash was offering you would sign up for a shift and get paid $12 an hour, as opposed to just like the tips, and people were fighting over those shifts. And so I think if you look at non-traditional media, there are stories everywhere about gig work, people not being able to get enough work. And so that could be why that sounds so high as well. Maybe they don't feel like they're officially employed. But yeah, no, we have so many missing people from the workforce, and and honestly, that's why we've had Kenny on here. He's in the comments right now, diving in, and you can look at these year-over-year changes. I mean, they're just brutal. And when you start looking at it, not just in aggregate, but at the city level, it looks even
Yeah.
more concerning because of the actual demographics of the people that are unemployed, which a lot of it are our youth. And Kenny and I did a Forgotten American all about that. And so, this is the labor market is not strong, and it has not been strong since 2007. And I'm sorry if anybody, I mean, that's reality. They've been telling us it's strong. Now, did we have a services boom? Probably. Yeah. But during COVID, but that wasn't true, productive jobs, adding things, that could then basically right now, we don't even really do productivity anymore. We pay shareholders and we pay CEOs. Like we don't invest in research and development. We don't make anything. We're not producing the kind of jobs that could give someone their middle class life. So
And technically, guys, this is not here. Let me throw this up. Technically, this is not U6. U6 is the underemployment. This is a straight up, Jack. This is straight up asking them in the last 7 days, are you employed? Yes or no. So it's a yes or no question. Are you unemployed? And 152 million people said yes. And almost 100 million people said no. So that's why and then, the other thing that's very interesting is look at how many, and now I think that this may include local government jobs, to your point earlier, Jack, but 20 million government jobs, that's 13% of total jobs are government jobs. I had no idea about that, but this is just a straight up yes or no question. Are you employed or not over the last 7 days? That's it. So it's not the U6 is important, but this is just like there's so much in that poll survey. I don't even care about the U6. I mean, we've seen the Fed and we've seen the data providers multiple times change entire price buckets and data points. We saw that with the median sales price for new homes. They completely wiped that away. We saw it recently, I think about 3 weeks ago on this channel. We figured out on this channel that they revised up the personal savings rate by like 68%. They just took it up, masking what was really going on with America. So I'm like, hey, the Fed is the Federal Reserve, Fed economic data is giving us this rosy colored picture of the consumer. But when we go straight to the consumers, they're saying something way, way different. And I hope that when we finally get through the pain and suffering that we're going to go through, and some people are already going through, I hope we remember this. I hope we hold these people accountable for the things that they said. I hope we hold these data providers accountable, because I know for sure that there are some consumers and mom and pops that are basing their the investments and purchasing large items based on these reports. If they wake up and they're like, oh, wow, everyone's doing great. There's
and my
nothing
California
bad.
story will be all about that. I'm not trying to cut you short, but I'm just saying that, when we'll talk about this in the wine industry as well. because
Okay, whatever.
that's I think no, I don't want to cut you short. You keep going, but I
No,
think
that
what
was it.
your point is so important that everybody who's making business decisions are looking at these headline numbers. And and you think about, like we talked about, how they revised away the high in new homes, and just revised it away. But every builder, every company out there was using those prices to shore up their financials, to basically make assumptions about what they could make in the future. So these numbers matter. But Jack, I know you have something as well you want to talk about.
Yeah, it's regardless of the narrative you're hearing in the press about the jobs report and unemployment remains low. They're using the government's own numbers that never get reported in the press. There are 3 particular trends that are very potent that the press completely ignores, that are adding to the general misery of the average person in this country, and nobody ever talks about it. And you can see this in the cold, hard numbers that don't care about emotions and feelings and political talking points. But table A7 and A9 on the non-farm payrolls reports, all right, that is where the cold, hard reality of this labor market is hiding. And you're seeing in table A9, we are losing millions of full-time jobs. For over 2 years now, we have lost millions of full-time jobs. Those are well-paying jobs with benefits. We are gaining millions of part-time jobs. Those are much lower paying, non-benefit providing jobs. And all of those new part-time jobs are going to foreign-born workers. In other words, people that we're importing that are displacing native-born Americans from the workforce. All right. That is not a political talking point. You can see it in the math on tables A7 and A9. Which one are we looking at here, Trav?
You know what? I had that to talk to you guys about. I totally did not include that, but this is the household right here.
Okay. I mean, you can even see it in the household number there for full-time workers. And then those numbers all the way on the right, you can see we lost a little over 150,000 full-time jobs in the last month. All right. Now, this month was also an anomaly. We lost part-time jobs in the last month, too. That's a difference there. But we're still gaining them year over year, still up over 1 million part-time jobs. So losing full-time, gaining part-time. And then I don't know where you would find it on this version because you're looking at the PDF version, but table A7 shows you worker statistics by nativity, either foreign-born or native-born. Now, there's some caveats there, right? Foreign-born does include some U.S. citizens. There are plenty of U.S. citizens who are born in other countries, but it also, the lion's share of foreign-born is illegal immigrants. And so you can see foreign-born 16 years and over. If you go by employed, right, it's about the 4th data point down under foreign-born. A year ago, it was 30,056,000. Now it's 31,090,000. All right. So 1 million more foreign-born people in the United States working versus a year ago. Now scroll down to native-born, people born in the United States, underemployed, about the 4th one down. We had 131.6 million a year ago, and now 130.8 million. All right, so that's about 800,000, 0.8 million native-born Americans pushed out of the workforce, replaced by 1 million foreign-born. All right, so you've got U.S. citizens, native-born, losing full-time jobs, being replaced by part-time, largely illegal immigrants. All right, and you never hear that in the press. You never hear that in all these articles where they say it's the best economy ever. What's the matter with you complaining poor people? You don't get how good you have it. When they're doing it to us, and you can see it in the numbers, and this gets reported every month, this gets put out. Nobody on CNBC or Bloomberg or CNN, none of them ever touch this stuff, but you can see it there in the math.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And just real quick, last thing, you guys, I did want to say, so establishment said 12,000 increase, household total loss in 1 month in October, total loss of jobs counting full-time and part-time, 391,000. So establishment says we got 12,000. Household says we lost 391,000 jobs, both full and part-time, in just 1 month.
Yeah. That's your strong labor market for you.
Yep.
Sounds strong to me.
Ooh, okay. Ready, Travis, for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Should we do, wait, Lytle gave us a super chat. Do you can you guys find that? And she had a question for me on delinquency.
Lytle, is that how you pronounce that? Little?
She
What?
said it's love you, and then the TAL are the people she loves. Or I'm saying it's a she, maybe it's a he. I'm not sure, but yes. Explain that uh in the chat. But yeah, so mortgage delinquency, as just as Travis was just saying, the Census Pulse survey also tracks delinquency, and we can see that it's a lot worse than what the official industry folks are saying, like Black Knight. And with Black Knight in particular, they have about 35% of the actual mortgages on their platform. And they don't have they don't have many, I should say, of the special servicers out there that do like default work. And if you go look at another source like Inside Mortgage Finance, they have FCI lender services with a 35% delinquency rate because they cater to the private note space, as well as they kind of cater to delinquent. They are what is called a specialty servicer. So, I believe kind of it's the same thing as like with unemployment. We can see the trends going up month over month. Delinquency increased 3.48%. And that's even according to Black Knight. And what that did is it put us back at those very concerning June levels. And so there's a push and pull of mortgage delinquency as people quickly get them into workouts as soon as possible. And there's all kinds of workouts. And, with these FEMA disasters, they're going to go on an instant FEMA hold in these counties where there was, it has a FEMA designation. So we're already seeing that increase, and that could not really include any of the hurricane stuff because, as we talked about earlier, it landed on September 26th. And typically, if you're going to be late, you always want to pay by the 25 to 26 business day of not calendar day of the month, because you don't want to pay at that over 30 days delinquent because that dings your credit. So my point there is that we're not seeing an impact yet from Helene and Milton and the delinquency figures. But the trend is there, and it's frustrating because we know that there's more delinquency than people are saying. But the trend is it's going up, and it's up 30 days, something like over 20% up year over year. I mean, so this is happening. We're starting to see this delinquency, and the hurricanes are they're going to really increase the impact, and we're going to see a lot more delinquency here in the near future. Okay. California. Okay. Well, actually, I just want to do this story, which feels kind of silly after our first hour, but it's just it's a good example of exactly where people just forget the laws of supply and demand and our aging demographics. So Zero Hedge just put out a piece about kind of a map that showed where you kind of by state wine consumption, because wine consumption has been going down. There was a little blip during COVID, but it had been going down across the world, which we'll talk about really quickly. But you can see, I think this is hysterical. Where is most of the wine consumption?
Where it's most expensive to live.
Right out of DC, right? So, and we'll see in 2022, DC residents had the highest per capita wine consumption in the US, with an annual average of 1.05 gallons of ethanol from wine, or 41 bottles of wine. So they there's a table. I don't know if I put it in here. No. Okay. But there's a table that kind of goes by state, and DC is, and I think this is hilarious because we're seeing this wine consumption go down. But just like everybody told us, Travis, nothing's going to happen to DC in the housing market. I'm seeing inventory explode there. So absolutely DC is going to have trouble, but I think maybe they should all stop drinking wine and start governing instead, is what I would say. But thank you very much. So anyway, our favorite Silicon Valley Bank does a report every year because they have a huge wine division that talks about the wine industry. And I think it was really, so this report came out on January 18th, 2024, from our friends at Silicon Valley Bank. And you guys remember what happened there. And I love the fact that the report was called Survival of the Fittest, because they're really going through a really unprecedented time in the wine industry. And we'll get into a little bit more of it. But basically, what he was saying, I think it's so funny because I think any of these industries, and especially, like in something like wine and even housing, everybody's waiting for this fictional cohort of the millennials. When Harvard did a study, we've pulled forward that demand, plus people can't even afford to do that anymore now. But he says, waiting for a fictive cohort to age sufficiently to discover wine, are believing that our strategies have always worked before, is toxic to adaptation when the context driving demand changes. That is something the weakest businesses will do. Their lack of adaptation will cause a predictable outcome. So why is it no one talks about demographics in housing? Like, it's just so funny to me, but they can admit it in wine here. But so this is just some more, just kind of going through some of the different, the retail side, the premier wine, but basically they're saying there are structurally more planted vineyards acres than there are required to satisfy consumer demand. It's also the same thing you and I are seeing, Travis, in the housing market, right? We have seen so many more houses than A, what they're saying, but B, that we need.
It just updated.
What?
It's just the existing active inventory updated, where we are now officially over pre-pandemic inventory nationwide. That updated, I think, November 1st.
Awesome. Thank you for that. No, that's great. That's great. So here's just kind of some stats around it. And one example of changing demand, data from the National Institute of Health reported that between 2012 and 2022, for those aged 19 to 30, monthly cannabis use increased from 16.6% to 28.8%, while alcohol use declined from 68.4% to 67.5%. Can you imagine being in that industry? And then what's happening too is it's a lot of your, so really where they got hit was in the wines under $12. So, your poorer consumers, and a lot of those were these smaller growers, small businesses. So I feel like what's happening in our economy right now is, first we're taking out all the small businesses. Now you're starting to see the bigger companies start making cuts and things like that. But our small businesses have really been struggling. And so, here it is. Okay, so total world consumption hinted at a downward slope in 2014 before becoming obvious in 2017, except for that slight reprieve in 2020 during COVID, where everybody was drinking a whole bunch because they were home. And so also the world's wine producing countries had high hopes that the growth of Chinese consumption might help business. But that didn't ever happen. So this is another theme that we hear all the time. The Chinese, right? We're seeing it in luxury, those brands, luxuries, LVMH, their demand is down from the Chinese. So everybody was looking at the Chinese. Now, I love the last sentence because I hear this from in every corner of the economy. Maybe India will become the next hope. And guys, I've spent a lot of time in India. No, that's not going to work out for them. And there's cultural reasons for that. There's all kinds of reasons. But so anyway, this just kind of shows you by country, which this is probably too little to see, but just how it's been, how the volume's been going down since 2015. So in China, negative 103.3%. Woo. Okay. All right. So this also, I love how at least the people that, they're actually talking about what's going on in their industry versus like our industry, Travis, where they refuse to acknowledge the demographic story. But basically, they put on here the largest wine consuming countries' adult population growth rates. And as we know, are they going up? They're going down, right? So this is bad news for the wine industry. And then this just shows you the annual change in U.S. volume wine sales, 2000 to 2023. I mean, look at that, guys, from 2000, 2005.
That's not adjusted for inflation either, right?
No, probably not. No, it's probably nominal. So, and then so I found this humorous. SVB, their predictions for 2024. Tasting room visitation that was lower over the past 2 summers will grow in 2024. That didn't happen. Slower in 2023 through October. DTC sales will grow again modestly in 2024. Well, they're not doing so well. And so here you can see this happened in July. Biggest U.S. wine distributor slashes staff. Now, this just really irks me. Like the people that wrote this could not get Southern Glacier to call them back or talk to them or confirm anything. And so everybody had to go to kind of social media where you were seeing it all over social media. And so this is just a lovely story. I just want to read this from a Reddit thread. Can confirm lots of layoffs. Won't say what state I was in, but I was one of those that got laid off. And by the way, guys, when you get laid off, you often do have to sign an NDA. I don't know if you know that, but that's to get your severance package. They will make you sign an NDA. Yeah, corporate America is super fun. So glad to be out of it. I went to work like normal, got an invite to a meeting, heard the rumors, and by the time I got there, I was told my position was eliminated and it was not related to my performance in any way. All of my devices were taken at the meeting, so I didn't even get to text my direct reports. Crazy part was when I shot my direct supervisor a text after only to get a call back in about 5 seconds, shocked because they were not told in advance. Yeah. This is how we treat our employees. And so this I haven't, Jack, this will, kind of up your alley, and I haven't been able to dig into this, but they were also this big winery were in trouble. They got raided, and they are under some kind of investigation around taxes. IRS were there. And so, but also like price fixing and bullying in the industry is another big part because they're a huge organization. But that lawsuit from the FTC has not been filed yet for anti-competitive pricing. So we'll see if it gets filed or not. So this is just, I'll read this. Certain trade practice promotions can give rise to income tax liability to this that does not get reported. For example, sometimes a wholesaler rep will report that he or she bought several rounds of drinks at a retailer bar, but really just did a credit card swipe that made a payment to the bar server. This would be income to the bar server and might have some false income tax deduction questions for the wholesaler. So that sounds like what maybe has been going on. So recently we've had another a vintage wine bankruptcy. This kind of rocked the wine world, but I wanted to talk about this because it's one of those 2021 IPOs that never should have happened. I mean, insanity how many IPOs we did back then. And they kind of, when they IPO, they were at $12.63 a share, and now they're at 11. They were at 11 cents when they filed bankruptcy. So okay. And then I just talking back to SVB just a little bit, because it is just so clear to me more and more, Travis, that, because you and I have talked about this at length on your show, just if that bank bailout had not happened, like so many things would be different right now. So many things. But of course they had, so they were 1%, like the folks that, SVB was serving, that was like about a 1% of their overall portfolio. But it was still an important part, because I think I have a quote in here where someone's talking about their, okay. Yeah. So fortunately, Tuttle and her husband, so this is a small business that's suffering, have a line of credit that gets them through rough patches and helps when large bottling bills come due. I think we're okay, she says, but I'm still not comfortable. So, all of this entire business, you can tell they're all using lines of credit, and had SVB not been completely built out, we probably would have seen all of this a little bit sooner. And again, it's just this is another industry where all these people went out and made decisions based on what they were reading in the media about the economy, and you can see it. And so I don't think they're okay. She may think they're okay. I don't think they're going to be okay. Okay, and that was it for the slides. So I just think these stories are everywhere, and this is what happens when you kind of don't tell the truth. People go diving into businesses. They make decisions that they wouldn't have made otherwise, but they're relying on mainstream media telling them that the economy's great and people are going to keep spending and it's all going to be okay, when clearly the trend is obvious and the demographics are obvious.
How do you wake people up, Melody? Doing these videos? Is that why we're doing this?
Yes, this is why we do it.
Do you get paid any money for doing this? Have you?
We have not, but
Yeah.
we haven't taken the money yet, but yeah.
Great report. Great report.
Hear me out for a second, Mel.
Sure.
The birth rate in the West is collapsing, as well as a
Yes.
lot of Asia. All right. And wine and alcohol consumption is down in these same regions. I'm beginning to think these two things may be related. Am I crazy to think that? All right. I mean, I joke around on my channel all the time. I say, folks, we need to drink up and make bad decisions because we're just not having enough babies. And you can
Jack,
see it right here.
Were you drinking when you had your babies? Is that what you're saying?
I can neither confirm nor deny. Well, you see, Travis,
buddy.
people love
I
each other.
wasn't. I have 4 kids. I was not. I'm just going to say that. You better be careful, man.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of trends there, right? The cannabis trend, obviously displacing alcohol consumption. Something that wasn't mentioned, but I think it's just something I've observed: the White Claw effect, right? These new seltzer things are very popular with women in particular. I think you're probably seeing some wine displacement going on there.
Yeah,
And
this is the
also
first year
trend-
spirits did higher volume than wine. But yep, go ahead.
So would spirits capture the seltzers thing?
I think they would have to with the ones with the vodka in it, but I'll confirm that. Yeah.
And the other thing is we're seeing a lot of restaurants going out of business, and people drink wine. I would guess people drink wine more frequently with a meal at a restaurant versus a meal at home. I don't have the math to back that up. Just kind of something I've observed. So I think that too, people eating out less because of inflation is probably taking a chunk out of the wine consumption as well. So you can see a lot of trends in this report.
Yes.
Comment. There were split actually in the comment section. It was very intriguing. I don't know if you were watching that, Melody, but they were like, I don't want to go there, but they're like smoking weed and like, no wine, and like, no weed. Like, no, it makes me panic. Like I was like, wow, you guys, how many people are smoking weed in the comment section? Like, you guys do you, man. I know it's hard out there. You know what I mean? I got no hate for anyone.
By the way, guys, breaking news just now live on DNN. I just got a text from my moderator, Mish, from my channel. Speaking of restaurants going out of business and people not drinking wine, TGI Fridays just filed for bankruptcy. Within the last hour or so, that story just broke.
I knew that they were having issues. I didn't know that they didn't already file.
Yes.
I did a video yesterday, and I mentioned TGI. That's crazy.
Yeah. Another one.
The restaurants are bad.
Now, I think TGI Fridays, was that the restaurant that had done that whole business securitization deal? I think they had defaulted. I don't know if it was Fridays or a different restaurant chain.
Oh, gosh.
I might have my wires crossed, but they had basically sold a bond several years ago where they securitized their entire business. And if they didn't make payments, then the bondholders would just seize the whole company. And it looks like this bankruptcy filing may be related to that one. There's so many restaurants going out of business right now. I might be getting this one backwards.
That would be so crazy if that was
acquisition
true.
falls through. Bondholders seize assets. That was the story about the bonds from a month ago. But that's not the bankruptcy. It looks like the company is probably filing for bankruptcy now because the bondholders seized all of their cash flow generating assets, which means now they have no way of paying what remains of their debt. So yeah, Fridays.
Yep.
I don't know that this means the restaurants are going to close because they're technically owned by the franchisees. And I think now those franchises are just kicking up to whatever entity is seized those assets through the bonds, but the company itself is gone. You're probably going to have some restaurant closures. I don't know how many, but
Yeah.
it's another one going down.
Yeah, I'm put a plug for someone that I talked to on X. Her name's Kat B on X, and she is in the restaurant business. And if you want to follow her, she does great reporting on and it is hard out there in the restaurant business, really hard.
Can I do
That's
a trivia
brutal
question?
business on a good day. On a good day, the restaurant business is rough. Today,
Oh, yeah.
It goes into what you both are saying. All right. This was a surprise to me. Jack, Melody. This is how big this industry is. How many, don't look, Jack. Don't go. I'm watching your hands. How many people are employed by the food and drink industry? How many do you think? Don't look. How many? Melody?
I have no idea. I have
None?
no idea.
Any inclination at all?
Are we counting?
We're doing
service?
millions or what
Yeah,
are we
counting servers.
Okay.
How many people?
I'll say 20 million in the U.S.
20 million? Holy smokes. Okay.
Well, I mean, we're counting farmers, we're counting waiters, we're counting cooks.
No, not farmers, just like retail, like food.
Oh, just the restaurant business?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, like restaurant
Not
business. Restaurant business. Food and drink.
I would say 6 million. Yeah, that's.
I thought 6. 14.
Okay.
14 million.
million.
14 million. 10,000 restaurants have been closed, I believe, so far this year. 10,000, that has affected 300,000 people. So far this year, 300,000 people laid off, 10,000 restaurants closed. 14 million people at stake. Their jobs at stake.
It's crazy.
Think about.
And hardly anybody's talking about it. It's just crazy. And did you guys see in the private chat, we did get the name of the 2 compounds?
Yes, I saw
that report. Okay.
Yep. Some those I'm not even going to try to pronounce them in the fire service. We call that methyl ethyl bad stuff. All that stuff that you can't pronounce that goes up into the air when plastic furniture and drapes catch fire, that kind of stuff. So I'll look into what those compounds are and where they come from and what kind of concentrations they're finding. But that's interesting. Thank you for that, Melody.
Yes. Yep, you got it. All right.
Alrighty, I think that's it. You guys have anything else?
I don't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Jack, looked like you were going to say something. I can always read you pretty well, Jack.
I got a big mouth. I always got something to say, but you got to cut me off at some point, Trev.
All right, cut him off, Melody. You take over, Melody.
Yeah, I want to say thanks again to Andy. Just incredible work in reporting and and the fact that he's so committed. He could show images. He could, but his integrity and to not be sensationalist and to really try to bring the facts. Like I'm so glad, and I'm so glad we got to have him here. And thank you to the community, because the way we got to have him here is because you guys come and watch every week. And that's why we keep doing this and trying to reach as many people as we can to wake them up. And I want to say special thank you to the moderators who keep that chat going, engaging with everyone, and really just make me feel loved, to be honest, when we're up here talking, because they're out there fighting for us while we're presenting these stories. And so I just want to say big thank you to them. And they do such a great job. So thanks again, guys, for watching this week. We'll be hard at work at it again to bring you some more stories next week. But always remember, math really does matter. Thank you.